right. Dr. Bolin and Cynthia, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Let's mute Todd Price as well, please.
Yes. Let me make him also a co-host and ask to unmute.
Hi.
Hi, Todd. All right, we rolling?
Let's give it one more minute really quick, and just everyone, before we begin, make sure you are muted. There are a couple of moderators on this, so if you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat. If you have people that are having trouble getting in, again, put that in the chat. There's also registration, and this will be available for recording later on. So don't worry about, you're not going to miss anything, I promise. We're going to be here and answer your questions for as long as need be tonight, within parameters, of course. So I'd like Todd to introduce himself, Dr. Bolin, Cynthia, and then we'll go from there.
Who first?
You go, Todd.
All right. Well, I guess I began helping with AFTT. I don't know how many months ago, 7 months ago, and just have worked with Cynthia as an investigative consultant and helping whenever I could. But my career before I retired was that I spent more than 20 years as a federal law enforcement officer and with the FBI. During my career, I investigated crimes against children and was also assigned to a human trafficking squad that investigated the production of pornography, adult pornography mostly. And so that, together with the fact that I'm a CPA and also investigated money laundering and financial crimes. So all of those those parts of my career fit pretty well with all of the revelations that we've all learned about in the last nearly 11 months, I guess. So
yeah, we're almost at 11 months. Very grateful for Todd's help over the past year. I'm Cynthia Lyles. I'm a private investigator. I specialize in child sex abuse investigations against institutions of trust. So that's what I do. And I think most of you probably know the story, but Sherry and Lauren were introduced to me through lawyers back in the fall of October of 2022. And we were working on their cases. And then the Dean Brewer letter came out in March of 2023, set up the hotline. And here we are today with the FBI media release. So Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Lauren Rose. Zero credentials, and I sort of spearheaded the survivor care at Advocates, and I'm a survivor myself. And then we have Dr. Bolin, who is our new executive director, and I'll let her introduce herself.
My name is Natalie Bolin. I am the executive director for Advocates. During the day, I serve as a behavioral health director for our county for both mental health and substance use disorder. I have about 27 years of experience in the field of social work. I worked in child protective services for 18 of those years. I was an investigator. I investigated a lot of child sexual abuse cases. I went to work in the court system and also licensed. My area of expertise under my clinical license is trauma and addiction medicine, and I have a doctorate degree in social work from USC, and just really honored to be here and to be part of the team.
All right. I'm going to start just by reading the FBI media release today. There There's kind of a couple different versions. I'm going to read the one that's entitled Seeking Victim Information in 2x2 Investigation. The FBI Omaha Field Office is seeking the public's help in identifying victims or individuals with knowledge of abuse and or criminal behavior that has occurred within a religious group that traditionally has not had a name. The group has often been referred to by others outside of the group as 2x2, the way, the truth. Somebody's not muted. And the truth with no name, or the church with no name, among others. While it is natural for parents to want to gain a better understanding of the potential exploitation of their child, further questioning of the child may lead to inaccurate statements and increased emotional trauma. If you have information about this ongoing investigation or believe your child or other children have been victimized by individuals affiliated with 2x2, the FBI requests you complete a short online questionnaire. The FBI is legally mandated to identify victims of federal crimes it investigates. Victims may be eligible for certain services, restitution, and rights under federal and/or state law. Your responses are voluntary, but may be useful in the federal investigation and to identify you as a potential victim. Based on the responses provided, you may be contacted by the FBI and asked to provide additional information. All identities of victims will be kept confidential. To assist in the investigation and to be provided with information on resources available to victims, please answer the questionnaire to the best of your ability. It may be that you have already given this information to an FBI agent or law enforcement, but please provide it again on this questionnaire. Based on your responses, you may be contacted by the FBI and asked to provide additional information. So I can tell you, we have many victims who have already reported to their local jurisdiction, state jurisdiction, county jurisdiction where they were abused, which is the proper thing to do. And I've heard from a lot of victims today since this came out, even though you've reported to your local jurisdiction, which is still really important, we want you, if you're comfortable, we want you to also contact the FBI and report to the FBI. They're working on a federal case. So since I've now read the media release, I'd like Dr. Bolin and Lauren to talk about survivor care, and then we'll go into Q&A.
Thanks, Cynthia. So we just want to express that this is really, really hard and acknowledge that we are here to support you and to go through this process. And so there might be a lot of questions about what to expect, what happens when I make this call. But we just want to make sure that you're supported through this process and just express that we're here to support you through this. And I think I'd like to turn it over to Lauren, who has been through this process, that can speak to her experience. For those of you that might have some questions about what is this? What does this look like? And just a reminder that we do have that care available. We have therapy available through Fund Recovery. If you, we can also work with you with local support as well. And so just want to express that, but also turn it over to Lauren to have her kind of talk about her experience.
Hi, everyone. So thank you all for being here tonight. I know there's a lot of emotions, everyone's at a different place. And so I just want to acknowledge that everyone on this call tonight is coming from somewhere very specific and different. And advocates, we have been working, Cynthia, I'd like you to speak to this for a minute, is that Cynthia and I at Advocates have had a relationship with the FBI for some time. And so it is it is a big deal, I know, for this community, inside and outside. And so I really want to speak to that, because the system in which all of us survivors have been through has put their own agenda before our human rights, before our own safety, before our own needs. And so for a lot of survivors, this is going to feel alarming. This is going to feel like a big deal. It's going to feel like, why is this happening? Am I in trouble? And I really just want to speak to the fact that survivors are not in trouble. And also, it's going to take all of you on this call that are not survivors to make sure that we're reaching survivors that go to meetings, that don't go to meetings, inside and out, to allow them the space and allow them to come forward if they're ready, and if they're not ready, to also honor that process. I myself have done a forensic FBI interview, and I can tell you I lived through it. It's not something that is exactly easy or fun, but I do have a trauma therapist that I see twice a week, that I've been in therapy for many, many years. And I have a lot of skills that I'm able to utilize as well. And so going into that process, I very much am a proponent and advocate that each survivor does not go into this blindly, and does not go into reporting without the proper therapy and without the proper resources. If you were to actually go into a civil litigation, or talk with someone like Cynthia in the real world, you would have to be going to therapy before you would be able to do that. And so at Advocates, we have sort of the same ethos, is that when you enter the building, we want to make sure that you are getting the resources you need. We offer therapy for survivors all around the world. I know that's something that some people might not maybe realize or understand, but it doesn't matter which of the 29 countries you're from. It doesn't matter if you go to meetings, if you don't go to meetings. It doesn't matter if you've reported to law enforcement, if you haven't. We offer therapy resources. And that's something that can be a little bit disorienting for survivors as you walk through this path. So I really just want to encourage people that, first of all, we have asked you to come to Advocates and report. And we are also asking you not to worry so much about that in this moment, but really take care of yourselves as you walk this path. And Cynthia, I'd like you to just talk a little bit about what this means, because I think one of the first thing that comes up for me as a survivor is, I'm like, oh, well, I reported to Cynthia. What does that mean for me as a survivor? And Todd can also speak to this as well. Like, oh, I see on the FBI page, there's something that they have resources, or I see people say, oh, there's a hotline I can call and I can get resources through a random third party or something that's national. But the difference is that when you call Advocates, we actually have third parties, Little Hooves and Fund Recovery, and we also have our own mechanism internationally to get you therapy. So as you walk through this process, you're not going to have to wait to walk through the legal process to get victim services, which is traditionally how it works in the legal system. But in this process, we're getting you therapy beforehand so that you have the support system and communal care that you need.
Exactly. Yeah. So I can tell you on the cases I work on against institutions of trust, churches, schools, Boy Scouts, all sorts of institutions. Before a plaintiff or a client files a claim, we make sure they are in trauma therapy. So we want to do that here for our survivors. A lot of survivors, and I'm sure some of you are on this call tonight, but you've already reported through us, you're already in therapy. And now you're gonna, if you haven't already, lots of survivors have already talked to the FBI over the last year, but a lot of you are now gonna start this process of also reporting to the FBI. We want to make sure that you have all of the therapy resources that you need to walk this path. It's really important. It's a traumatic process, not gonna lie. We can't tell you it's easy. It's a traumatic process. It just is. And so we want to support you through that in any way we can. And Todd can probably talk more. So I'm just going to give you from my perspective with the hotline and the database that I'm keeping. We still want people to report to Advocates and we still need to file claims in local jurisdictions. So a lot of these cases are still eligible for state and state claims under state law. So we want to do state reporting, but then we also want to help you walk through the process of federal reporting. And also, if you report to AFTT, and I'm not saying you have to, you can go straight to the FBI if you want to, but if you report to AFTT, your perpetrator's name is going to go in our database. So we've got that perp's name, so we can be on the lookout and do whatever we need to do to keep other children safe. So, and now Todd can talk more about reporting to the FBI because he's the guy, and he's worked on these cases. And he can also talk about what a big deal this is that the FBI has opened this hotline.
Yeah. First of all, and one thing I wanted to stress, because I don't think I outright said it, I am retired, so I am no longer an FBI special agent. So all that I share is my opinion based on my 20 plus years of work experience. So I think that's really important to stress. This is an exceptionally big deal. In that all of the it solidifies that this is, like, there's been rumors and discussions that the FBI is working on this, but this is a national release. And if you look through the FBI's page where this is posted today, there aren't that many other releases that get this type of notoriety, and it's very common for media outlets then to pick up these announcements. And so don't be surprised if there's further beyond the BBC that we all know has done such a great job, but there probably are other media outlets that will pick this up, and so there'll be more coverage, which hopefully will reach out to more of the survivor victims that are still unreported. I think we all know that there are many of those that have not come forward yet. I would say, and just on the victim services part of it, the FBI in any investigation has resources to assist victims that are identified. And like was said in that in the announcement, there's a unit in the FBI. It's Victim Services Division, and the agents investigating can put any survivor in touch with those people, and they'll do whatever is within federal law, and they're bound by of course the United States government regulations and legal requirements, but they'll do all that they can do, and they're dedicated unit that does all that is possible within federal law to help victims of these horrific crimes. So huge deal today in this announcement, and it's a big step forward to quash any of the people who think that this is just going to go away quickly.
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say is that when I did my forensic interview in the fall, it took several months to schedule, and I'd already been walking the state process against my perpetrator, which is my father. And so that process was arduous and on its own, but then to have a federal forensic interviewed with a CAFI, as what they're called, a child abuse forensic interviewer, brought up so many different feelings and emotions for me. And I think particularly because for me, I'd like to speak to my experience, but I also would like to speak to the general population, is that for most of us inside this system, we're taught that there is a possibility of losing family. There's a possibility of losing salvation. There's a possibility of losing status. There's a possibility of being abused. There's a possibility of being harmed because of coming forward. And then there also are decades and decades and decades of of survivors who have been not listened to, have been gaslit, have been treated terribly, have been excommunicated, and have died going unheard and unloved and uncared for. And so one of the things, you know, in approaching this, and even in the past couple of months when I went to my interview, is that I have relatives that are survivors. I have found articles of old survivors that came forward that workers did not listen to, that overseers did not listen to. And so in looking at that, we wanted to collaborate with the FBI, if possible, in creating a system that would be attuned to survivors' needs. And so one of the things that we asked for was for this victim, it's called a VOS. It's a victim online. Todd can explain it better than me, but it's a victim online survivor submission kind of form thing. And so what you're seeing online is that, and it's actually been articulated in a specific way to cater to this community in particular, and to cater to people inside the community that are currently being abused. And so when they say in that press release is like, parents, like, be careful with your children, Dr. Bolin can speak to this, is they're sort of couching, saying like, please don't interrogate your children as survivors. Please don't set them down and ask them like, are you being abused, or, you know, sort of cross-examine them in that way, because that right there is exactly what this community has done for decades and decades and decades in the name of God. And so the stakes are so high for survivors. And so we want to honor that this is a big moment, not because it's just a federal investigation, not just because there are lots of people involved, and not just because survivors have come forward, but also because for survivors, this is a life or death process. And we also understand that there are going to be survivors that are not ready to take this path and take these steps. And we want to honor that as a community, and also to reach out to the people that you know that go to meetings, your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren, and to give them this press release, and to honor that they might tell their friends and then come forward on their own. And that might be a very particular process. So one of the things is that when I went for my interview with the CAFI, which is a child abuse forensic interview here in New York City, the CAFI said, you know, did my interview for several hours. And then afterwards, the victim services women came in, and we sort of chatted for a while. And I told them what we were doing at Advocates, and talked to them about creating this hotline and what the potential for that might look like. And I told them what our resources were and what we were utilizing, and what I myself had been working on and also had been using for my own healing journey. And they said, well, you actually probably are better off going through Advocates than going through the victim services at the FBI, because the process is so long. And of course, I'm not utilizing Advocates services, but I just want to say, as like a prop to what, as a group, we've created, that these services are recommended and they are complementary. And also, I think a first, if not secondary step for a survivor to take before they actually report. And so you'll see a lot of places that say like, oh, you know, go online and get help, or call this person and they have a database, or, you know, write in here, or join this private group. And I just want to say, for survivors, that might feel supportive, and there are moments of support within those experiences. And also, that is not, these spaces are not trauma informed. And so everything that we're developing and have developed at Advocates, and with the help of Dr. Bolin and lots of other clinicians, and with the consulting of Todd, with the work of Cynthia, with the work of the FBI, is that we are putting together this sort of lifeboat for survivors, so that when they go out, they're not going to be alone, and they're not going to be without the proper skills and resources. So I actually want to read a text. Cynthia will probably kill me, but that's fine. She'll deal with it later. She's like, oh no. But I actually want to read a text, part of a text that I actually sent to the FBI the other day. So Cynthia's like,
What's
what?
coming? What's coming?
Okay. I'm not sure you understand how vital it is that survivors have therapy resources and also a united front to push this message out from happening today. So we have lost survivors and we have had other survivors try to commit suicide and dealing with suicidal ideation. No one else inside this community and outside this community is providing therapy or communal care for any of these survivors. If we ask survivors to come forward, we also have to honor how hard it is for them to do this. The FBI is, quote unquote, at least the way I was raised, is like, it's of the devil, it's of the world, it's of something outside what we were raised in. And so if you're deep inside this community, this is a choice for survivors between their salvation, between choosing their family or coming forward. And not many survivors have trust in outside sources in law enforcement. And that comes because of this community. This community has told survivors for many years that in the name of God, they do not have these human rights, that they don't have a right to be seen and put in the center. And so it's deeply concerning to me that that when this announcement goes out, this FBI announcement, that it goes out in a gradual and particular way so that survivors have time to process it. And also survivors have time to realize what they're getting into and the support that they need. And because all of these online spaces that survivors are utilizing are not trauma informed, it actually makes it very easy for survivors to be deterred, one, and to two, realize that, oh, an online community is enough when actually every single survivor from this community deserves and has the right to trauma therapy, inpatient and outpatient services. And that's a hard line, hard stop. And that's sort of the ethos of advocates. And before this hotline even came out, we really wanted to have that firmly in place. So the next thing is I said is that these are my thoughts, not Cynthia's. She's much more kind than I am. And I just know that my family would not have ever called this. They would not have ever called this FBI hotline. They would not have ever utilized this survivor form. I have, a beloved aunt who came forward and she would not have ever been able to utilize this. She would not have been ever able to call. And so I really just want to honor tonight the stakes for each survivor, and that when going into this press release that we ask the FBI to also honor these stakes and to also honor what each survivor has been through, because it's so easy to look at something and think, oh, it's just an FBI press release. But we want each survivor to know, like, this has a lot of thought and care and time, and communal care has been brought into this. And even bringing Dr. Bolin in and Todd and others, they are people who, go to meetings. There are people that don't go to meetings that are working with advocates. And each of these people has a survivor's best interests at heart from the beginning to the end of this journey, no matter what your journey looks like as a survivor. And so I ask that each of you, as you leave this meeting tonight, really remind yourself that whatever you're posting online, however you're speaking in the community, outside the community, however you're talking about survivors see everything, right? If you're on CCF or if you're on any X support group or internal support group, survivors see everything. And, I say this, I have trust issues. So, if I see something, I'd be like, you know what, probably not gonna report to Cynthia, or I'm probably not gonna report to the FBI because this seems really, really scary. And there's so much chatter about it. So I really ask not that you curb your voice or hold your voice back, but rather that you honor those amongst us that have been hurt and are suffering and have died without support and without help and without care and without getting the attention that they need, and that this is a criminal organization. There are a lot of abuse cases within it. The stats are insanely high. And these survivors, there are survivors that will never get the help. And so I just want to pass it over to Dr. Bull to speak a little bit clinically about this in terms of just how high the stakes are and why we're starting out with this before we start out with the Q&A.
No, thanks, Lauren. Beautifully stated. So I want to just reiterate the safety around reporting. And when someone reports abuse, maybe for the first time or maybe not, that the acuity can get very high very quickly, meaning people can oftentimes become suicidal. They want to harm themselves. Sometimes they become gravely disabled, meaning it's very difficult for them to take care of daily needs, and they need that higher level of care. And so it's not uncommon to need inpatient care, inpatient hospitalization, intensive outpatient. There's different levels of care that we can offer through advocates. And so I just want to express that this is a very difficult time for many people. And so please, like Lauren said, please check in with one another. Please be kind. Again, it is not who is in the fellowship versus who is out. We are all human beings, and we need to come together as a community. And so I just want to stress that, again, we need to take care of one another. And please do not hesitate to reach out for help. Don't hesitate to reach out on each other's behalf. Sometimes when someone is in a space and they don't know they need the help, please reach out on their behalf. You might be the lifeline that they need. And so we're here to support you through that. And we're here to connect you to therapy and at any level, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, and we're here to support you. We have advocates that can walk this walk with you. So I just want to stress that.
Thanks, Natalie. Todd, can you talk about what a big deal this is that this hotline has been put up by the FBI, what that entails?
Well, yeah. First of all, to get a hotline established like this takes an agent who has spent a significant amount of investigative time already in writing the proposal and seeking the approvals through the Omaha division in this case, and then all the way through the headquarters units that oversee the crimes against children programs at the divisional level. So it takes a lot of approvals to get this put in place. And of course, in the federal government, everything has a budgetary component to it. So it's requesting the resources for this that they don't allocate to just any case. And it's really significant in that it shows that this case is not just one that they feel will just be resolved quickly and can be closed. The case is moving forward. This is a tool to make that happen, and it is significant. So, yeah.
Thank you. Hey, I see the questions rolling in. Let's go to Q&A. If everybody's okay with that.
The first question is, what is AFTT's relationship with the FBI?
Well, we've been working with them since last year. I think June, probably.
Yeah.
We started reporting. So lots of people were calling the FBI. I mean, I don't know if you guys, anybody who was on social media, there were numbers popping up all the time. Hey, everybody call this FBI agent in San Diego. I actually waited for months. This is kind of funny. April, May. I remember thinking, okay, 3 months, the FBI is just going to come and take over. We're going to be done. So, and I kept hearing, oh, all these people are calling the FBI. Great. And then finally the FBI called in June. And so we started working with them in June, and they weren't going to come and take over. Nobody was riding in on a white horse. It's a one-way relationship. We feed them information. They tell us very little. So that's what it's been.
Can I just add, Cynthia?
Yes, you
There
may.
there essentially is no relationship. It is the
No.
federal government. It's the federal government, federal law enforcement doing their job, and so that means that AFTT simply had information that the FBI, the investigative agents, and believed was important to further their investigation. There's no relationship.
Nope.
And if it
I mean,
is,
we
it's consensual. So let's just get
Yeah.
that clear. Yes.
Yeah, we have a consensual, yes, but it's not a back and forth type of deal. Yeah.
I think you kind of covered this, but what does the FBI need to do or verify before they ever release a press release? What standards have they met in order to do this?
I think Todd probably already covered that. They got to a place where it was a pretty big deal and they decided to go ahead because they were doing a pretty major federal investigation. You got anything to add to that, Todd?
Well, so there's different within the FBI. There's different levels of investigation. Like the very first step is like a preliminary inquiry, but they're well past that. And so this is a case, and I don't know because I have not spoken to the agents, but I can tell you that the resource commitment in this at this point in the investigation and the travel that the agents have done does not happen at the preliminary inquiry level. And so this case is advanced to where they probably have, and this is my speculation, they probably have named subjects. So specific people that they're gathering information and investigative evidence on. And so the case has progressed to the point where they actually have people they're investigating. And perhaps the organization as a whole, but generally there's also named individuals. So
That is a fact. And but I see some questions popping up. Are they interested in historical and abuse? And if your perpetrator is deceased, yes, they're not turning down any phone calls. They're welcoming any reports of abuse, whether or not your perpetrator is deceased. And if it's historical, that's fine. They like them all.
can I add one thing to that too?
You bet.
I would encourage everyone to not self-filter. So
Yeah.
don't think your information couldn't be helpful. Let the FBI report the information that you have, whether it's just something you witnessed, whether even if you're not a victim, but you saw particular things that you think could help. Don't try to self-filter like my information's not significant enough. Just report it and let the FBI handle it however they see fit.
Well said. Well said.
And another thing I want to add to that is because the workers in particular, because the elders and a lot of these people have traveled, you might be anywhere in the world in particular, and you might have been abused in New Zealand and you need to report that you were abused by someone from the States. So I really want to bring that home, is that you bringing forward this case might actually be a game changer for someone else's, and also a game changer for a worker or an overseer that has multiple victims in multiple countries or multiple states.
Yep. Don't worry about where you are in the world or who your perpetrator is. Go ahead and report.
Is the FBI only looking for cases since 1980?
No, they'll take them all. They had to put a date. They had to put a parameter, I think, in their release. Was there a date in there somewhere?
There was. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
The original press release. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they'll take anything previous to that as well.
So if we reported to AFTT, we should do another report to the FBI.
Please, if you're up to it, and we'll help you walk that path, but yes, please.
And then one more that kind of ties to that. Can I please ask, can we submit to the FBI for international abuse?
Yes.
This person just wants to confirm that Cynthia will still be involved in the investigation going forward.
We'll still have a lot of state claims that can be filed. We very much want to get those done so we can hold people accountable, if you're under the statute of limitations. Also, somebody helped me do some research in the last couple weeks. I worked on a case, over the last few years, and I discovered Massachusetts had this super interesting, statute where if you left the state, the statute tolls, until you come back to the state. So if you abused, I mean, this particular perp abused kids in a state, and he left in 1979, and they brought him back, I think in 2021 or 2022, and as if he never left. The statute told, and so they could arrest him as if it were 1979, like no time had passed. So we're actually discovering that a lot of states have those statutes. So with the workers moving around as they have, if a worker's been moved from a state for abusing kids and they've never been back, it's possible that that criminal statute was told at that point. And if we can bring them back to the state, under a warrant, and charge them, the charges will be under the statute of limitations. So yes, short answer is yes. We still would very much like survivors to come forward to AFTT, and also as a reminder so that your perp is in the master database, if you want it to be there, and then also report to federal law enforcement, the FBI.
Cynthia, I'll jump in and talk about the 2 federal grants that we just wrote and applied for that will help pay for legal services in the future for these types of cases.
Yep.
So it is ensuring that we can have paid staff, for the future around these types of legal services. And these grants are through the Department of Justice. And so we just sent our grant applications in, and we won't hear until October. It takes a while for federal grants, and it would come into fruition January of next year. The grant is good for 3 years, and then you have options to renew for additional 2 to 3 years.
Yep. I see a question coming in about the hotline in Omaha. I just got a glance of it. That hotline is, anybody in the world can use that hotline number. The headquarters basically of this particular investigation is in Omaha, but they're doing intake from all over the world. So use the number, use the survivor submission form, wherever you are in the world, that's the place to report.
Yeah, and if you'll see tonight, actually, if you get on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, the FBI actually in Portland retweeted from their local field office, like, oh, please support our Omaha field office's work, because it also applies to them. And as this slowly rolls out, you'll start to see more of that happening across the states and also internationally.
I have a question if you're ready. I was a victim of physical abuse and emotional incest as a child. My abuser was a professing man, but he is now deceased, and I don't know if other people in the church other than my mother knew about the abuse. Is there any point in reporting my abuse now?
I would say call us, and we'll do an interview and ferret it out and walk the path of whether or not we should report this to. I mean, I'm gonna have Todd weigh in on this too, but on that one, I think report to AFTT, and then we'll figure out if there's some sort of way to go that we should also report to federal law enforcement?
I would just say too, though, that part of the investigation is very likely who knew about this abuse and who facilitated the movement of the now deceased worker to a different state or country. So the FBI is interested in if there was knowledge of the crime and they moved that deceased worker to a different area, that can still be important to the FBI. So I would say, yeah, I would say report it.
Yeah, that
Again,
sounded like domestic violence to me. So that's why that sounded like a DV situation.
Sure.
But yeah, absolutely. If it was a worker, yes. We want that reported to federal law enforcement.
My message would be don't self-filter if you can. As long if you're at a place where you can, from a healthy standpoint, then disclose it to the FBI. Don't self-filter if at all possible. If you need help, then Cynthia and others can help. But
yeah, and actually to speak to that, someone I think a question popped up is talking about, are these federal agents trauma informed, and what's the like what's a CAFI? Todd, can you speak to that?
The agents themselves are not likely forensically trained interrogators. They could have received that specialized training, but they're not. They're law enforcement officers. So I don't want to speak. I don't know that the agents that are investigating this, but they have a different purpose than a therapist or their job is to put bad guys in jail, and that's their primary motivation. I can tell you as an agent, sometimes, and not all the time, but sometimes agents are not as sensitive to victim needs as trained victim advocates and victim services people. So they want the information to further the case, because their primary goal is to put bad people in jail. So I don't know the specific agents and what specialized training they've received, but it would be very common for them not to have to be less victim orientated than many other people who have specialized training in that.
Yeah, and I think, Todd, too, that's something that Dr. Bullen, you can speak to, and there's a couple of survivors on this call as well that I chose to be interviewed by a CAFI. I had the option, I could speak to an FBI agent if I wanted to, because the nature of complex PTSD, which is what I have and experience, and most survivors experience, is that you want to have someone that is in the room that has your best interest and is also good at their job. And you also want to have someone that is behind, before you enter the room, you want to have coping skills, you want to have grounding skills, and you want to have a setup after you leave the room. So even if someone is trauma informed, it still is an arduous process. Dr. Bullen, you want to?
Yeah, and this is why we highly encourage everyone that's making a report to also go into therapy, because this is really tough. And, like Todd said, you might get an interviewer that is not trauma informed. And so having that support in place, having a therapist that can help support you. And then also we offer having an advocate under AFTT to help walk this walk with you, can also be of a support.
Todd, this is for you. I know a lot about the money affairs and the meetings and the workers. And there's a lot of illegal stuff that's going on besides the sexual abuse, which I'm not trying to undermine, but I don't know if the FBI is where I should be reporting it, because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Actually, I can answer that because we ask them.
Hmm.
Go ahead and report it. Just go ahead and report. You can add to that, Todd, but we specifically asked and they said, even though the release is about the child sex abuse, go ahead and report any financial information you have.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, the thing with federal crime is there's no crime happens without money. And so the money is a driver in everything from international terrorism to human trafficking. So it's critical that they have a picture of money movements and how that is conducted. And if there is illegal, a lot of the illegalities can be IRS related, and they wouldn't have, the FBI doesn't have jurisdiction over IRS cases, but still report it because, again, don't self-filter. If you've got information, report it and they can deal with it however they choose.
Can I just say it's a gift to have Todd here? Thank you so much, Todd. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Okay, next question is, should I report for a family member that is disabled and hospitalized?
Yes.
I assume Cynthia's list of victims who have reported to her be shared with the FBI? Question.
No, no.
Do you know if there will be significant difficulties in proving or charging people that are culpable for covering up abuse or moving abusers?
Well, it all depends on what evidence you can uncover through witness testimony and documentation. So that's why Todd was talking about if you have any knowledge of workers moving perpetrators around, any knowledge at all, you may think that the information you have is insignificant, but it may be very significant. Any knowledge you have with regards to that makes it possible to hold the people who have moved perpetrators around and covered crimes up accountable. So report it.
I'll also just add that if the question was, is it difficult? The answer is yes, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Most the human trafficking crimes have a specific element of intent. And so the investigators will need to prove intent. And that is difficult in any law enforcement investigation, is the element of intent. It can be done. It's usually done with emails or like written documents that show that they knew and that they had the intention to do this or that. So it is difficult.
Yeah.
I would caution.
Yep.
I would caution people not to get their hopes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just,
yep. Because what Todd's saying is that you have to prove that the intent was, we're going to move this worker over here so he can abuse more children. So that's very difficult to prove.
I'm kind of opening a can of worms here, but there was a situation in the States near Oregon where I grew up, and there was a lot of girls, young girls, that were encouraged by the workers to give up their baby. And the baby was actually put in another professing home across the state in Eastern Oregon, or the United States. And this kind of happened quite a bit. And there was a few girls that were my age that were kind of pressured. They didn't actually give up their baby, but they were pressured. And not by the doctor that did it, but by the workers. And so I don't know, is that something that's a crime?
No, probably not. If an illegal adoption took place, yes. But being pressured to give up a child for adoption is not a crime. I mean, is it coercion? Yes. Maybe if you could prove it on a large scale. What are your thoughts on that, Todd? That it was a systemic, coercive operation?
I am not aware of a federal statute that would cover the facts that were just described. Yeah.
Unless it was like a literal operation where they're.
Yeah, unless it could fall into the human trafficking umbrella. But yeah, I'm not aware of, just if it was a doctor that was trying to help young women place children with, and they were pressured by workers. Yeah, I would say this though, don't self-filter, just report it and tell the story, because the whole story, if the FBI has the entirety of the story at their disposal, it's helpful to the investigation as a whole.
I think the piece that Lens didn't mention, but some of those children went on to be abused in the homes they were placed in. And so if they knew that was a situation going into that adoption, that's where I think the story ties together.
Well, that doctor's dead though, right?
Oh, I mean, the doctor, the workers probably might be too, but I'm just saying that
Right.
that whole pattern.
Right. And you think they knew that the homes they were placing these children in were abusing children?
Do you?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I would
say-
say report.
Tell the story. That's,
So we have a reiteration, it seems to tie together here. AFTT will be available for support to anyone going forward to the FBI to get through that. And then one question Steve had, can Cynthia elaborate on why all her information is not already shared with the FBI? What determines what is shared and what is not?
Well, I've shared perps with them continuously since last year. I don't share survivor information.
You don't share survivor information. So without their consent, you don't share survivor information with the FBI.
I was subpoenaed one time, but since then I've just fed them perpetrator information, and we check with survivors. The FBI has been working on this since last year. They've done a lot of work without any input from us. They've gotten names word of mouth. They've interviewed people I didn't know existed. So they've done a lot of work on their own. We've continued to feed them perpetrator names, and folks we think they should take a look at. And I've reached out to a lot of survivors asking them if they're willing to visit with the FBI. So no, I'm not sharing survivor information with them. That's why they're setting this up. They can't take my word for it. They have to hear from survivors. I'm hearsay. So they've got to hear from the survivors themselves to be able to build a case. So no, I was served a subpoena last year. I gave them everything I had, and they served a subpoena on me because I said I wasn't going to give it to them because I just said, I can't give this to you. This is all super confidential. And they said, well, it's too bad we're serving a federal subpoena on you. So that happened. And then ever since then, I've just been feeding them perpetrator information. And then we send survivors their way.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate too, there's a lot of sort of hubbub and a lot of chatter on the interwebs about whether Cynthia and Dr. Bolin are ethical. They're both under their licensures and definitely in their position for a reason and have the trust and validity of survivors. And again, we work with third parties so that these survivors can get mental health resources And even in collaborating with the FBI, because they would decline our relationship if you were to ask them. But we have been considerate from start to finish of survivors, of their data, of their safety, as much as one can be, also considering that there is really no such thing as safety. You can't promise that for any survivor. And so we want to honor that, as well as that we understand there are risks involved with all of this. There's risks involved with getting therapy and with help. And there is also a lot of misinformation out there. And there are a lot of misguided entities that are not helpful to survivors. And so I really ask that, these are not, people that don't know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And yeah, Cynthia's right, subpoena, and yeah, she's doing what she can, and so is Dr. Bolin, and so is Todd.
I think there was a question about limit to confidentiality within therapy. And so I wanted to kind of segue into that when someone goes and receives therapeutic services, what they talk about in their sessions are confidential. There are only certain situations where a therapist has a duty to report to law enforcement or a duty to warn. And so that's when someone is a danger to themselves. So that someone comes into session and they're suicidal. If they're a danger to other people, meaning they come in and they have plans to kill or hurt somebody else, or there is reports of child abuse or elder abuse. Those are the only conditions that a therapist is mandated to report. And if we don't, then we can lose our license. And so I wanted to clarify that. Everything else that is talked about in a therapy session is confidential.
And I want to reiterate what Todd said, all of you on this call have information, have been privy to know abusers. You have abusers inside your community. You have abusers inside your families. You have victims inside your families. All of you have information. And so please do not filter yourself. Each one of you after this call should be going and reaching out to every child, every teenager in your field, every parent, every worker, every overseer, every ex-member, any person you haven't spoken to in 10 or 20 years. That is your communal job and responsibility, is to pass this and spread this on. And then in turn, to go and submit all of this information that because if everyone on this call did this, I think we'd see a massive shift in this case.
Yeah, and we tried to talk to the workers last year about that. Probably the majority of the folks that we would like to get this message to have left the community, possibly because they were abused. So we want to reach those folks and help them. And if there's, this is just a step forward today in possibly being able to serve up some justice. We can't promise that, but we hope it's a step forward. And but we want to reach everyone who is no longer in meetings, because probably a lot of those folks have left because of abuse.
Another question along the same lines is, if an adult reports abuse that happened as a child, a therapist wouldn't be obligated to report an adult's testimony, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
What would a successful FBI investigation look like? Would there be arrests, or would the church be fined?
Well, I'll let Todd answer that.
Ultimately, the FBI wants to charge individuals. So it's an indictment, a federal grand jury indictment, and that is then after somebody is indicted, they're arrested, and they go through the federal process and would eventually either result in a plea or a trial. But yeah, the individuals would be would be named in a FBI investigation. There are Department of Justice civil actions that can take place, but that's not the FBI, that's DOJ. I don't know that there's any interest in a civil action like that in this case. So.
If I know a worker or perp has already been approached by the FBI, do I still need to call the FBI about said worker?
Yes.
My sister just texted me something, and I just want to say this is that justice is never promised, but accountability is a community action. And so I think here that's something that all of you can do, and you can also inform the people that you love to do the same, is to hold yourselves accountable to a higher standard that decades and decades and decades of survivors have not had any of that accountability. So do that now. That is your responsibility and your obligation to one another.
Well said, Brittany.
If an overseer told us this summer that the FBI had investigated us and cleared us, that would be incorrect. Question.
That would be incorrect.
The overseers
Yeah,
have said a lot of things about the FBI as of late, and so you might hear all sorts of things. And just know that not
Yeah.
many of them are true or factual.
That's gaslighting.
Yeah.
I'll say this too. The FBI is not in the business of clearing anyone. They don't clear people. They charge people, or an investigation may not proceed to that point, but they don't clear anyone.
And let's take that a step further, Todd. No law enforcement agency clears anyone.
No,
They just don't
that's right.
move forward. Yeah, doesn't mean anybody's cleared, which we've heard a lot from the workers. Because a person might not have been charged, the narrative usually is they were cleared. That's not what they do.
Yeah, the workers and overseers have done a lot of gaslighting over the past, exceptional job over the past 11 months. And so I just ask you guys to reorient yourself. And again, don't filter and submit something into this form. You all have stories, you all have experiences that you can tell.
If the FBI has to prove intent, how are they going to incriminate anyone or anything in the fellowship?
Don't filter. Let them figure it out. Report.
I would say too that don't forget there are other investigative avenues that are not first person interviews. So the FBI can collect evidence through search warrants or grand jury subpoenas for header data at a minimum of email traffic, and then potentially do search warrants for content. And they also have borders. The Department of Homeland Security has border search authority, so that if anyone transits a international border with a computer device, it could be searched and the information could be shared with the FBI. So first person interviews are just one investigative tool, and there are many others.
I have a 3-part question. I think the first 2 have been answered. Is Cynthia able to send to the FBI all known victims on her list, or do they individually have to report? The last part I don't think has been answered. Can you reveal the list of known perps?
Okay, so I'll answer the last one first. We will be releasing vetted perps. And then what was the first part of the question? Sorry.
Is Cynthia able to send to the FBI the known victims on her list?
No. So we want all victims to report to the FBI we will be reaching out to certain victims. We already have been over the past couple months, asking them if they would like to talk to the FBI. But now that this is in place, we will be reaching out to certain victims to work with them to report to the FBI, but we want all victims to report to the FBI. I hope that answers the question.
So they do have to individually report, and you will hold their hand if they would like.
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
And a lot of people have been misinformed and miseducated to report to the workers, report to overseers, report to their elders. You'll even see some of the policies and sort of, ideas in certain regions that, oh, you can report to this safe person. That is not safe for a survivor. That is not ethical, and that is also not helpful. So if you have reported to any of those people, and you don't feel like you're in a place that you are ready to report to the FBI, that's also fine. We'd love to get you help. But if you have reported to those people, if you are a Dean Brewer survivor, those are the cases in which we want to help you guys get to the FBI if possible, and to fill out those survivor forms. And there's been a whole reorienting for survivors, and like, oh, report to the workers, report to overseers. There's that even, people that are doing their own sort of hotlines on the internet, and you'll see those are not affiliated with the FBI. And so I really want to clearly state that if you have reported to anyone at all, they are not going to take their word for it. They're not going to take their data and their information. You yourself, as a survivor or someone who knows information, you have to clearly go to the FBI. And what we're offering at Advocates is we are offering therapy, support, and advocacy to help you walk that path in a safe way, and also to maybe not walk that path in a safe way, so that no matter what you decide, you have the help and communal care that you deserve. If you've reported to anyone at all, that is not where you should be going unless it's law enforcement.
Grooming be reported to the FBI?
Can you repeat that?
Should grooming behavior be reported to the FBI?
You're muted, Cynthia.
Well, I was just repeating what you've said. There's creepy grooming and there's criminal grooming. So just report it. Don't filter.
I would like to ask about the reporting of enablers, overseers like Dale Schultz, that made this all so much easier for perps.
Well, Dale Schultz is he's a criminal in my opinion. That's my opinion. And I think he should be reported in every instance that anyone knows about. So moving a perpetrator to another country to stay in homes, and that person is a pedophile, is at the very least reprehensible, possibly criminal. Report him.
That kind of leads into the next one. There's will this investigation involve senior leadership that covered up the abuse?
I think we already covered that. Just report what you know and let the FBI sort it out.
But it could. The answer to that too is that it can, and if the evidence shows it, then it should.
Could the FBI request all emails sent from an overseer?
Depends on their subpoena power, right, Todd? What kind of case they got going?
Yeah, well, and it depends on the time frame, like how old, and so I mean, there could be time constraints. Email content is not generally obtained through a subpoena. I believe that would require a search warrant.
Or,
for
sorry, yeah,
content.
search warrant.
Yeah,
But there again, don't filter, right? I mean,
absolutely.
just report it if you know of something. And yeah, if you know of an email address or an IP address, or if you used to provide a worker's electronic devices, and any information like that that you can report could be helpful.
What if I report it to someone other than AFTT? Are they working with the FBI as well?
The FBI has talked to a lot of people. If you've reported to somebody other than AFTT, we might not have that name in the database.
Again, I just want to reiterate, Cynthia and Dr. Bullen work under their license, and there is no other third party that does that at this time. So if you've reported, please go to the proper sources versus going to someone where they're not trauma informed and they don't have the therapeutic resources to help. That applies to workers, friends, ex-friends, anyone.
Have all current overseers moved or covered crimes of abuse?
I believe so.
Yep.
My opinion.
I would think it's maybe not just the meeting people that have got abused, but there could be people that are not in the meetings that were around the workers that got abused.
Absolutely.
And so when I know this from experience, because when I was in Oregon, there was a pedophile and he was molesting the boys. But we were just about ready to get the our fathers to do something about it. And I was about 12, and they arrested him the next week in Wednesday night meeting. He had the Wednesday night meeting, and his boy that worked, a boy from my school worked on his truck, and he reported him. So it's not always comes there. So if the more we tell them, the more that they have they connect the dots, so to speak.
Yeah, especially the workers that were in foreign countries. I mean, they abuse kids in the community, not just in meetings. We have reports of this. We actually have several reports of this. It's horrifying. So they're in these third world countries, abusing the villagers and the tribal members, the children of tribes and villages. And what a legacy.
I want to ask I have a question that was sent in to me is, we know of a victim, but they aren't coming forward. And we know of the likely perpetrator, but not certain. What is the correct action?
I mean, I'll let Todd weigh in on this. I'm gonna say the FBI is probably not, that's gonna go into a bucket. That's probably not gonna get looked at because that's already hearsay. I know, I mean, we can work through that. We can work with the reporter and work on getting the information to a place where the survivor's ready to come forward, and we're a place where we feel confident in the allegation. What do you think, Todd?
The FBI generally wants to talk to the victim.
Yeah, and we do too. But we can work through that over months. If it takes a month or a year, we can work through that till we get to a place where the survivor is comfortable coming forward to us, because we're working with family members or whoever, and then eventually get that survivor to come forward. These things take so much time. It's kind of phenomenal, actually, that this much has happened in less than a year. This is actually a pretty fast moving train in my world. So these things can take years and years to ferret out. So I'd say have the family member call us and we'll just start working on it.
Is there any restitution for a family if their child, for example, committed suicide because of this abuse and therefore they should report?
That would be a civil lawsuit. And we're working on paths forward with that. I would highly encourage that family to contact AFTT.
If someone reported to you, Cynthia, will you let them know if you shared the name of the perp they reported?
No, as if I've, can you repeat that, Alyssa? Sorry.
They're asking if they reported abuse to you, and they want to know if you shared the name of the perpetrator with the FBI, if you will let them, the victim, know that you've done that.
No, well, so the victim should assume I've shared all perpetrator names with the FBI, but the FBI can't take my word for that. So the FBI needs to hear from them.
I have a
What
question.
about,
Go ahead, Brian.
go ahead, sorry.
I have a question in my DM. So for workers or people hosting workers in their home that are now on this call, some of us have seen several on here that we know of that still host workers. How can the reports keep coming in without the fear of them knowing all of the offensive work being done, exactly how it's going to be done, without them knowing and being ahead on the other defensive side?
Good question.
Was that question for me? I didn't
I think
understand.
Cynthia, you and Todd, I think they're asking about, people hosting the workers in their home currently that are on this call. It seems like what's the liability, and also what's the cost of it?
Do they have children? I mean, I wouldn't, if I had children right now, I wouldn't host workers in my home. What are your thoughts, Todd?
Well, if the worker is, I mean, I think we all, I mean, I know, speaking for myself over the years, I have had at least four workers in my home that are now are known to be pedophiles. So that's just my own personal, my wife and I's personal experience. So the liability, the risk that you take, even with people who you think you know well, I say this, predators, sexual predators are some of the most clever criminals there are. And so to think that you could identify them because they fit some creepy stereotype is not the case. And so there is a risk. Is it an acceptable risk to your family? That's an individual answer. And if it's sister workers, do you feel safer about that? Probably. If it's unknown brother workers you've never heard of, you probably, I mean, there's just risk thresholds that we all make judgments about, and that's an individual family decision.
Yeah, and we have multiple reports of sister workers abusing kids, so that's not safe either. But I want you all to stop and think. Go ahead, Todd.
Not just relatively.
Yes.
I mean, clearly men and versus women,
yes.
it's kind of, yeah.
Yes, percentage wise, but I want you all to think about what Todd just said. He is a retired FBI agent. And so at the time he had these workers in his home, these 4 workers that he now knows are have allegations of pedophilia. He's a FBI agent with a background in child sex crimes. That's how skilled these people are. So you may think there's just no way that this worker I love would do this to my child. You just don't know. So
And I think the
So-
person wants to clarify on this is that, does the person mean that the workers' friends on this call will tell the workers how the FBI investigation will work so that the workers can prepare?
I don't understand the question.
Basically, people are asking,
Assisting,
yeah, go ahead, Todd. Yeah.
assisting the defense of a worker who's going to be under investigation. That's
Oh, gotcha. Well,
I would say that it's been rumored, at least, that some of the workers or overseers are seeking legal counsel, and so their attorneys would be probably their biggest resource to guide any possible defense. I don't think we've talked about specifics on this enough to really assist somebody mounting their legal defense against the FBI.
I have
It's
a comment and a
interesting.
question.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's interesting how the pedophile actually grooms the family, not just the kid,
always,
to
always.
get the kid to be in his care.
Almost always.
That's all.
Mhm.
So, is it okay if I say something?
Go ahead,
This is
Mike.
Mike here.
Hi, Mike.
Can you hear me? Can you see
Yeah,
me?
we
I don't
can
know.
hear you. Yep.
You know, I'm a bit of a techno twit, so back in the day, like, I'm pretty much cut off from my family. My dad, to this day, I mean, it was 30 years ago, no, 31, that I came forward at 24. 2024 is so much different, and I'm grateful for that. My abuser has been in my home, and Uncle Bob, as we called him back then, Robert Coughlin, was in my home. Dale Schultz was in my home, and it's even emotional just to even think back and talk about this. My home, I'm an addiction counselor, so I'm considered an adult child. That was a new term for me when I learned that at about 30, right after I was excommunicated by Dale Schultz. For what? Being abused. Now, all these men were in my home. Now, my dad to this day still doesn't agree that a worker would do that. So you think about that. So why was I excommunicated? At the time, I was told that Robert Corfield was moved to Montana for the need. Now, I don't think that Saskatchewan or Montana, which province, which state has more of a need. Today, he says that, well, I separated them because of, for Mike. Well, why he wouldn't tell Mike at 28 to 29? It would have been better to tell me then. So I think he's changed his tune for a lie. It's very weird to be lied to by the head of a church, as you can imagine, never mind being assaulted by him. So these men, and I've wrote about this, that heck, I'd believe them. I mean, they look great. They're groomed, they're in suits, they look amazing. So I don't blame people for believing them. They sound amazing, they're professional speakers. So my point is that these abusers, these enablers, these sex traffickers, these, quite bluntly, these criminals have all been in my home, and they've divided me from my family. I did not get a call. I did not get Christmas. I did not get Thanksgiving. I did not get birthday wishes. 3 days after is my wife's birthday, they called her on her birthday. So because of these criminals, they've divided me from my family. Because they are under the shield, they're under the mantle, they disgustingly use the name of our Savior, which makes it even more spiritual abuse, quite frankly. So when you really think about, and you're right, Todd, I dealt with that in addiction. Believe me, that was triggering. It's mostly men. I mean, in Prince Albert, where I'm from, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, there's a men's penitentiary and there's a women's penitentiary, and I worked in both. Held AA meetings and worked with the addicts. And there's about 50 men, 50 women, and 3,000 men, if you can imagine the different population. But when you think about having the unknown, who is only 40%, only 40% of the workers in this faith. Well, that's still a ridiculous number of a faith that I grew up and loved. Oh man, it's hard to believe, right? Grew up and loved, and yet they were in my home, they judged, and they kept that abusive alcoholic home together. Really? I mean, 3 sets of workers said, nope, you must stay together and endure this addiction and get the crap beat out of you every single day. And that's an honest truth. My mom eventually left and I stayed. So you think about that these workers, sisters and brothers, insisted that you stay. No, you can't get help. You can't get help for your addiction of alcoholism. You cannot get help. My mom's special abuse. You cannot get help from getting the crap beat out of you. And that one man who had allegations called me dirty. That's a fact. When I came forward, the one man who's the overseer of Saskatchewan. Okay, I'm going on and on. I apologize for that. Obviously, I'm very triggered. So what I'm really concerned about is that people would have, on this call, would have workers unknown, 40%. So you're playing the odds. I did do gambling addictions. The house always wins, 40%. Oh my God. Oh, please have safe homes out there, people. I mean, oh man, those are terrible odds that, well, I'm still over 50%. I'm pretty sure you're safe. I don't know. Please have safe homes. You have locks, you have alarms, you have latched windows. Don't open the door and let the wolf into your home. That's all I ask. Anyway, I'm out.
No, thanks so much, Mike. Thank you. We love you. You know that.
So well
With-
said, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, fits right in. We have 2 comments now. As someone who just left the work this year, I would not personally open my home to any workers right now, especially if there are children in the home. And that's just goes right along with our conversation here. And then what about their failure to keep perpetrators, i.e. members or elders they were told about, out of meetings and our homes, whether workers or not, and advising victims to forgive? Is that similar to moving workers around? I just think that fits right in. I don't think we need to answer it, but it's definitely something to think about. I have children and most of us on the call do. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's disgusting behavior. It's reprehensible. And some of it could be criminal. Report it. If you have information about that, if you have information that the workers knew your elder or somebody in your meeting was a perpetrator and they didn't report. I mean, most clergy in most states are mandatory reporters. So right there, even if we can't stick charges of trafficking, that we have lots of instances where we may be able to charge workers with failure to report. A lot of states have clergy mandated reporter laws. So report those, please. And those will mostly fall under state reporting laws. So report those to Advocates for the Truth. And then we'll also direct you to the FBI. Todd, I don't know if the FBI, is there a federal statute or law that covers mandatory reporting?
Not that I'm aware.
Yeah, so report those to Advocates for the Truth.
But I would say this, in a federal investigation, there are often local crimes that agents would identify, and those would be referred to a local jurisdiction. Matt Smith had made a comment in the about that being the case in international venues as well. But it's certainly true in a local community too. If the FBI is aware of a state crime that's committed in their case, they're going to share that with a state agency.
Yeah, so we've already had a lot of those where we've kicked it to the FBI and then they've asked us to report it to the state. So as far as relationship, that's been our relationship. Hey, will you take a look at this? Hey, will you report that to the state jurisdiction first, please? So we are working together in that regard.
I have a question from someone. Would it be good for the overseers to go to the FBI and confess to what they have done?
Of course, please, that'd be wonderful. We can direct them to wherever they need to go, their local office.
Are we to report for those who have already died that abused, or only living perpetrators?
Both.
What role would FBI have in other countries aside from workers moving across the border? I would abuse within other countries would fall under that country's jurisdiction. I'm referring more to abuse by elders, etc.
Yeah, they are interested in the international abuse, and this is a great question for Todd. He can talk about the FBI in foreign countries.
Yeah, so the FBI has legat offices in most significant countries, significant in the larger countries. They don't have a legat office in every country, but they would share any information if it is a citizen of that country. But one thing is that if a U.S. citizen has traveled internationally, the FBI can still maintain jurisdiction in an investigation. So if a U.S. citizen has traveled abroad and committed a crime, the FBI can have jurisdiction in that case. So if a foreign national has come, foreign worker has come to the United States and abused here, that could be investigated, or if a U.S. based worker, U.S. citizen, has traveled internationally, that can also be investigated by the FBI. But if both of the parties, victim and perpetrator, are foreign nationals, then that information would be passed on to the legat office in the respective country.
I'd like to pivot for 1 second. And Chris, are you on here so we can actually ask you a couple?
Sure.
Now, you and Dr. Bullen can talk about what it looks like to do this at a state level and what that sort of consists of, and Cynthia and Todd can chime in as well.
You said Nat.
Go ahead. Nope,
Oh,
you're on.
Go.
It's all you,
Go
Chris.
Oh, so I pressed charges roughly 12 years ago, and I was able to get justice through the legal system. And I had consulted a number of friends who were attorneys who had advised against it. And eventually I decided to go ahead and go through with it, and I'm really glad that I did. It was a pivotal moment in my recovery. So I encourage all people to explore their options. Did you have something to add, Natalie?
No, go for it. Tell your story. Yeah.
So that said, it was a very difficult and painful experience, and it can be for many people. And it's, I think it's really important to maintain expectations when you go into that, and it can be a really hard pill to swallow for survivors in the event you don't receive the justice that you deserve. So everyone's journey is very different, and I remember when I had walked away from the courthouse after my perpetrator was found guilty, and I just remember thinking that I wanted to do whatever I could to help other survivors achieve whatever justice they can get. All survivors, their packages are very different. One case is very different from the other. We're all very unique. And go ahead.
Yeah, I can just add that I've worked with many families that were going through both the juvenile court process and the criminal process at the same time. And the process of going through criminal court is very unpredictable. There's cases and families I worked with where from the investigative side, we felt like we had a really strong case, and then going through, which was held up in the juvenile court, but wasn't held up in the criminal court. And so there's no guarantee. And that's why it's really important for our survivors and families to be in therapy, to be supported, because this journey is really hard. And it can be unpredictable at times. And so we just want to just reiterate that piece of it, of why it's important to have that support around that, and that that court is very unpredictable.
I also want to bring up the idea that we've always been told, don't take your brother to court. And this is kind of scaring some of us, because we think that, oh, we're doing a wrong thing. But we're not doing a wrong thing, because these people need to be stopped.
You're not doing anything wrong. They're criminals. They need to be held accountable.
And Chris, can you, if you feel up to it, can you speak to what your process, what helped you through that process before and after, or what maybe, you would have liked to have had different around you, if possible, just so survivors can sort of hear like the path that you walked a little bit?
Sure. I think it took me a good 15 years of therapy before I could even entertain the idea of pressing charges. It didn't enter my mind for many, many years. I just was looking to survive myself. And I just can't emphasize enough how pivotal that time was for me in my recovery when I did get justice. So it was really important that I got there, but leading up to that was years of therapy. It was, I attended a few seminars, things like that were really impactful. I think.
Well, Lindsay didn't call. She works online, but she didn't call in the call.
Being part of AFTT now, I am so moved so frequently on what we offer here and how I would have benefited from that. So I think that bringing so much attention to the topic, and again, I always want to emphasize how important it is to not feel alone. So I think that's really important. But I really think that people at least need to sit down and get all of the details, explore all of their options. The investigation process was very heavy for me. I can't imagine it wouldn't be for anyone else. It's very extensive. It's a fairly lengthy process, and so that was the tough part. I think it's important to surround yourself with supportive people during that time, and I was definitely in like weekly therapy during the time that I was pressing charges and going through the investigation piece. But in the end, it's just, that's all very heavy therapy too. So I walked out from, healing during that time. So, and I've always emphasized, survivors are very angry. It's justifiable. But something for me, in my experience with getting justice, it really it gave me a sense of calm, and I walked out of that courtroom with a lot less anger and a lot more peace. And it was a very calming experience. So I had met quite a few survivors up to that point, and I just remember thinking, man, how can every survivor deserves to feel at least some of this, if not all. And so I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to ask, Lauren?
In terms of your process, like if you could sort of say, was it a couple of years? Was it a year?
Oh, for the investigation? So for me, it wrapped up fairly quickly. They're typically very, very lengthy. Mine, I think, took about 3 months. And then they had to set up grand jury dates and that type of thing. And that's the legal system is, it's far from perfect. So it took some time waiting for that. And so I want to say within 4 or 5 months from start to finish.
That's amazing and highly unusual.
Yeah, that's what I like to say. It's a process, but I know that I was very fortunate in my
Yeah.
I was. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Chris, one of the things that is amazing about you is that you've done so much work around this, and the articulation of it is much more accessible for you because of the places that you've walked with it. And so just for any survivors on the call who are contemplating it, just know we have a lot of advocacy and advocates at AFTT, including Dr. Bolin, who can walk this path with you and provide support and get you the resources you need so you're not walking it alone.
Which is so incredible.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Chris, thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of questions that are related. So the first part is, do you expect this investigation to pivot to financial tax evasion? And if so, what consequences does that have for ex-workers? Because none of us paid taxes on anything that was contributed to us. And then
Was there
let's see, do
another
you
one that went-
expect,
Okay, go ahead.
the other part of the question was, do you expect this investigation to, I'm sorry, that was the one that I just asked. I lost the other question. Go ahead and if you want to address that one for ex-workers first.
Yeah, well, tax evasion is through the IRS, and this has been reported to the IRS. So that's, I mean, we have no idea what their investigation will entail. If there's tax evasion, they might find that. As far as ex-workers being liable for unpaid taxes, I don't know.
What can I?
Please.
Gifts that are given to workers are just that, gifts. They're not income to. So if a worker doesn't have earned income over the reporting thresholds, they're not required to file tax returns, and so there's no tax evasion issue there. So,
but if you're over the reporting.
If you have earned income over the reporting threshold, then you're required to file a return, but gifts given to you wouldn't constitute earned income. So, yeah. Just
Up to-
support given to a worker is considered a gift, and it wouldn't be reportable as income.
Most of the time, this money has been given to head workers and not to the ones underneath. Head workers have been then distributed it to the younger workers. So if you're a younger worker, probably not, I would think. But there's some situations here that I know of about the slush fund that's used for conventions and stuff like that, that may be, and I will be reporting it.
Go ahead. Yeah, I would say report it if you think
Report.
it's suspicious. Yep.
The
The other
second
half
part
of that, yeah, go ahead, Alyssa. I was just going to read that.
Will the FBI be collaborating with the IRS to expose financial crimes?
I don't think they collaborate. Do they collaborate, Todd?
I worked a case jointly with the IRS. So it happens. But yeah, it just depends on the case.
I mean, we talked about it, and they indicated to us that would be that's an IRS thing, and
yeah, that's generally, especially in crimes against children and human trafficking, they work independently. Other types of cases from time to time, they are brought in together, and the IRS has some great investigative authorities that the FBI doesn't have, as far as, tax records and whatnot. So
as the case grows, it's possible that it would get to that point. So just report.
Along
If we know
those same lines,
adult,
I just wanted to clarify a couple more things about this IRS topic. What is the reporting threshold for the amount that's considered a gift? And what about estates?
Used to be.
Well, yeah, that varies from year to year as far as earned income reporting thresholds. Gifts are, if it's a gift, it's a gift. It's not. It isn't going to affect a person's taxable income. Earned income threshold, what triggers the requirement to file an income tax return, it changes with tax code. So it's been different, for a long time past.
But there is a threshold for how much you can give.
Yeah, that the gifting requirements are on the giver, though, not on the recipient.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's also consideration for interest. So if it's in an account and it's drawing huge interest, like if you have $500,000 in an account and the interest is drawing, that needs to be reported. And if it's not, well, there's a lot there that I know that I shouldn't know. But my parents were very well off, and I knew all that kind of stuff that went on, and it was very sickening, actually.
Interest earnings would be taxable if it's a trust. If it's been established as a trust, it's a taxable trust. They should have filed tax returns for it. If it's a nonprofit trust, there should be nonprofit returns filed. So there's definitely reporting requirements for that type of circumstance.
I feel like we uncovered a lot of good stuff on the giver's side, because that is important for us that are paying taxes and maybe not aware of that. And the trusts are a big deal. If we're ready to move on from that, I have another question, Cynthia. If we know adult survivors of child sexual abuse and they do not want or can't report to the FBI, should we report their perpetrator to the FBI without using their names, or is it best to respect their agency in this and not report anything but continue to support them?
Yeah, continue to support them. We work with us to get them resources. Like Todd said earlier, we need the survivors. The FBI has to have the victim report. That's why they set up the hotline. They cannot take my word for this. It's hearsay. We got to have the victim report. So that's hearsay. That'll go in a bucket. Now it may, don't filter. We'll keep repeating that too. Don't filter, because you never know. They might have 6 other reports on this person. So they might do the same thing with the reporter that we do, right? Hey, we have 6 other reports on this person. Can you please work with the survivor to get him to come forward, especially if we have a criminal charge filed? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on this call know that this has been a thing in the Ira Hobbs case, right? We need the survivors. First, we needed them to all report to Missouri local jurisdiction, and then we needed them to report to the FBI, because the more survivors that report to law enforcement, the better, but they need the survivors. So, I mean, I just worry that third-hand reporting with the FBI is not going to get picked up on at all. But if we can work with the person who's in touch with the survivor to get trust built up, so that survivor is willing to come forward, that would be ideal. And we can get them help. It makes all the difference in the world. If we can get them therapy assistance while they walk this path, it's a world of difference.
Okay, this question is, my abuser was not convicted or reported by their mom because she was pressured by the workers not to report. However, their abuser was reported by a family who was not 2x2 and convicted to home arrest. How would I find that documentation?
Give us a call and we'll help you find it. I can find it.
Donna, are you on the
Someone-
call by chance? Donna Smith? Let's see if she might not be. Okay. Okay.
I am.
Donna, can you speak just a little bit to, because you're one of our beloved trauma therapists that's international. Can you speak to a little bit of like what your perspective is as a trauma, being trauma informed, and what you would recommend for these survivors as they walk this path?
I think a lot of it is to understand the impact of trauma on the neurobiological processes. Because what happens, particularly to children, are going to impact them in so many ways. If you know what the ACEs are, the adverse childhood experiences, the scoring for people who have been abused or experienced trauma at a young age is a predictor on things such as education, vocation, earning power, mental health, relationships, and even things such as, an engaged fight, flight, freeze response, and how that impacts the person across the lifetime. So trauma-informed care is extremely important, because that way you understand the person that you are assisting or treating. All of those things need to be taken into consideration when it comes to creating a safe therapeutic space for them, and to remember that trauma and perpetration is not just experienced by the victim, it's experienced by the entire family. And so when you have a child who has experienced abuse, the impact on the family, the impact on their partners, the impact on their ability to learn, the impact on future relationships, all those. This is a lifetime experience. And so when we help people, when we advocate for them, it's important to remember that their nervous system, their entire neurobiological processes have been impacted to the point that trust is difficult, sense of safety is compromised. And also there's the aspect of religious trauma, which makes this extremely complex. So it's a very complicated process, people who have experienced trauma. And I think it's just important to remember that not everyone has earned the right to hear your story. Not everyone is safe. Not everyone knows how to be trauma informed. Not everyone respects your story. And there are people really who are not safe to hear your story. So your story is yours. Your story is sacred. Make sure you have people in your corner who are trustworthy and trained. It's been a great privilege to work with advocates. These are some of the most professional people I have ever worked with. Thank you very much, Cynthia, Lauren, and Natalie.
Thank you, Donna.
Thanks, Donna.
Somebody wants to verify that abuse by people that have or are going to meetings should be reported, not just workers and overseers.
Absolutely. Report those to the FBI, please, and then report them to us. I'd actually prefer that you start with the FBI. In my real life, in my cases, if there's an active investigation going on, which we actually have here now, I stay out of the way until it's been reported to law enforcement, because that's the most important interview. So report to the FBI, and then if you want your perp in the database, and you want and actually I'm going to back up a little bit. We can get you started with therapy resources before you report to the FBI, but I do not want to interview you before you report to the FBI. I don't know if it's making sense to anybody, but that first interview to law enforcement is really important. So we can get you set up with therapy resources, report to law enforcement, and then we can do intake with you as far as getting your perp reported to the database. But that way we have you started with therapy, you go to law enforcement, then get your perp on the database, in the database. Does that make sense?
Actually, you know, Donna and Dr. Bullen, I think the two of you, if you could speak just for a moment to like people that have reported to workers, to elders, to overseers, to family members that are not trauma informed and that are urging them to stay quiet, like what are some things you might recommend for them in terms of safety, or for kids that are under 18, you know, what do you guys recommend for community members that are currently being abused?
I would say reach out to help either through school. If you're going to school, school is a safe place to report, and you can access help that way. For most states, you can access mental health services after the age of 12 without parental consent. And so you can access support that way. And, you know, we have a campaign here in our county where if you hear something, say something, or if you see something, say something. And that's a national campaign. And it's really meant to keep kids safe and young adults safe. And so I would encourage that same campaign within our community, within our fellowship. We have to keep one another safe. Keeping secrets, not reporting, that is not safe. The acuity level and suicidal levels that we're seeing, and it's in our community. People are not okay. People in our faith and our community are not okay. Our kids, they're not okay. And we have to check in with them and make sure that we are supporting them. And the worst thing you can do is shut somebody down and make it an unsafe environment to report. That's when that internalization happens. And that's when your acuity level, gets very high very quickly. And the last thing we want to do is we don't want to start losing our young folks. So I can't stress enough the importance of accessing help. And it's okay. Accessing mental health is just like health. Mental health is just like physical health. It's okay to go out and access physical health for our bodies. It is okay to go out and access mental health for our brain. And Donna, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Natalie, thank you for bringing up the topic, particularly of suicide, because I think, especially around last Christmas, we noticed the increased amount of suicidal calls, and it actually reached crisis level to the point that we were literally up day and night taking these calls. And so if we can impress on anyone who has any kind of authority within this church that we are really in trouble, and this is just beginning. So we really need to build a support system, a safety net. Thanks for bringing up all those resources too for the kids.
Yeah, and I think something that Donna brought up so well is that, AFTT, we shut our Facebook page down for a month, right? And people thought, oh, all this stuff's happening and crisis, and we sort of went underground and had to reorganize in terms of what we were doing as a page, because this is a very large movement, as we can see. And with that, to expose things had to come a certain amount of being very transparent and open. But the problem with social media in general across the board is that it is not trauma informed. It's not safe for survivors. So while the impetus of stories are very, very helpful, we also want to encourage, that's why we're stepping away and making we made our page a business page, because we actually want our survivors to get help and therapeutic resources, as opposed to going online and accessing resources that actually are not resources, or people that are not trauma informed, or people that might discourage them from reporting, or encourage them to report to the wrong person, or encourage or ask questions that could inflame, activate, trigger, and also, harm them in a real-time way. And so we saw that through the fall. Cynthia and I were experiencing such high levels of survivor care and suicidal ideation and calls that it's just, I mean, if you guys sort of could see behind the scenes, you would understand the need for what you say online. Yes, we want to be honest and transparent. Tell the FBI everything you know, and also be so tender with one another in your interactions, because this community has so much complexity and so much trauma and dysfunction and gaslighting. There, I could go on. And even if you leave the community, those things are still with you. Like, you have to get actual help. And so, Donna, thanks for bringing that up, because that is something that I think people are, a little disoriented by or confused by. Make no mistake, our quietness on the social media front has nothing to do with what we're doing behind the scenes. Make no mistake that, what we're out there talking about, we're on the phone with survivors all day long. We love our survivors. We always will love our survivors. We don't care what you believe in, what your faith is, where you live, what your age is. None of that matters to us. And we just want to know, we just want to tell everyone that if you come to advocates, if you need help, we will get you help. We want you to report to the FBI, we want to encourage that. And we also know it's hard and this is exhausting work, but we're here and we're not going anywhere. And I think, you can see from Todd and Dr. Bolin and Donna and others on this call, Alyssa and Ryan, and there are lots of people like Chris who have walked the path. And there are also a lot of people that are really hurting. And there are also people whose lives have been lost in the past year. And so I just want to, in the past decade, so really just being tender with one another, honest and tender, which are really complicated things, and providing communal care. And please, please, please report anything you know to the FBI. Like Todd said, like put it on a sticky note and just say, don't filter yourself every morning when you wake up. Like, just don't filter yourself. If you have something, don't think about texting us. Like, please go message the FBI, don't put it on a closed Facebook group. Don't put it on CCF. Please go post it to the FBI. Let them know. Let them take on all of your secrets and all the things you've been holding in and all of your trauma and the years of complexities within this community and without this community. So please, please, please use that as a space and a vehicle to utilize your voice if possible. And if you need therapy resources, we got you.
Okay, we have another question. How far-reaching can this call for information from the FBI go? The fellowship has been such a secret. It's not as public as the Catholic Church scandal yet. How can school counselors nationwide learn about this, and when abuse is reported to them, or even CPS, link it with this case? Or is this just wishful thinking?
So this is being pushed out to major media by the FBI. And then we're also going to be pushing it out to smaller markets through the FBI. So areas where we know perpetrators have been. And you can contact the FBI directly and say, hey, I think it'd be really important that you run this in my local newspaper, or even send it to your local newspaper. But they're going to be working now on pushing this out to major media and small markets.
Yeah, and one of the things is that the language in this community and outside this community does not match the crime. The language does not match the behaviors, and there is such a high level of gaslighting. So just know that, children and a lot of these survivors don't have the language or the ability to articulate thus far. And so what's really important is that you start giving these survivors the reflection of this FBI survivor line, so that they can see like, hey, this is real, and also give them some time to process it. And just, again, holding that tender space for them. Yes, people are going to be learning about this in the public eye, but it's going to take, it's going to take trauma therapists a long time to learn the language. It's taken my trauma therapist many, many years to understand what a worker means versus a minister, or what an overseer is. That's not something from slavery, you know what I mean? So there's all sorts of dynamics here that again, the world has to be educated on and the community has to be educated on simultaneously. But there are those providers that will do the work, and it's going to take a long time to get there.
Is there a timeline for
that-
releasing, naming vetted perpetrators?
Well, here's the thing. So we're still doing a ton of intake. So I know everybody wants this wrapped up in a package with a bow on it and all this stuff released. We've been releasing names over the last year. We will make this happen, but we're still doing a ton of intake and vetting claims. So we will get it out there. Please be patient with us. We do not want to put a name out there that we're not sure of. Todd's been working with me on this for months and months and months and months. So we're gonna make it happen. You have anything to add to that, Todd? You're muted.
Sorry, it's like drinking from a fire hose. So.
Yeah, we still are. Yeah. And we're still trying to get a lot of work done behind the scenes. We are communicating with overseers and workers. We're trying to get a lot of witness testimony on certain claims. So it's just constant communication with various people, and it's a lot of work behind the scenes, and we will get those names out as we're ready to.
And I also just want to mention that there is something that, Cynthia and I, when we had 600 perpetrators, Cynthia looked at me and she goes, how many is it going to take for people to like stop asking the question, like, how many are dead? How many are alive? It's like, one is too many. And this community has an extraordinary amount of perpetrators, like 700. I don't think you guys understand the magnitude and the wasteland of crimes that have been committed by these significantly gross population of men and some women. It's just a total wasteland. And so please, even in asking that question, like, please understand that for survivors, that can be minimizing and not trauma informed. And 700 perpetrators, Cynthia and Todd can speak to that. Is that not a ridiculous number in a very short amount of time, Todd and Cynthia?
Tip of the iceberg. Yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, it is. And so if you really want to get me started, ask me for data. Because so we get asked this every day. Can we get a breakdown of where these perps are, which countries? We want to know the hot spots. What does it matter? What does it matter? These workers have traveled all over the world. You want me to tell you that he was in these 3 states and not yours? Will that make you feel better? Every state has victims. Every state has perps. Every state has victims. If you want the data to make you feel better or to so you can quantify it, we're not going to do it. When the data is out there, you can all run the numbers and put pins on maps and figure it out. But for me, 1 child is too many. I don't care where they live. It's in this fellowship. That's all you should care about. This is happening in this fellowship. And these workers have been moved all over the world. That's all you need to know.
Todd, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Cynthia said it all.
I think something I want to say is that, with Dean Brewer visited how many countries in the time that he was an overseer and worker, how many victims, and how many of those have actually reported to law enforcement? So those are things that are extremely alarming. And the data shows that it takes survivors a long time to come forward and be able to articulate their experience. And so what we're looking at here is, again, it's a wasteland of crimes. It's horrifying in every way. And I just want to say, like, if you know a survivor that is only reported to workers or overseers or elders or, some sort of online source, please, please, please tell them about the FBI, and please tell them that they are entitled to therapy, they are entitled to services, and they are entitled to a trauma-informed community. 100% they are.
Can I say something?
I don't know who asked, but go for it.
Go ahead, Ange.
Hey, first, thank you guys for everything you've done for us. And Todd, thank you so much. I always enjoyed seeing you. Little did I know I'd be on a Zoom call with you. But I guess what I'd say is, for those still going to meetings and around workers frequently, this is the time where you open your eyes and open your ears and you will start to see a different world than you were ever told or exposed to. Okay, you really will. Like Cynthia just said, the numbers are staggering, folks. One is too many. Why is it we have to continue to hear different stories on social media every 10 or 15 minutes? I mean, this is crazy. I talked to one of my cousins in Ireland today. And it's amazing, really, what is still going on. This is devastating, guys. This is our children. I didn't say anything till I was 37 years old. I'm a grown tail man now. I'm 45. I have 2 beautiful stepdaughters and a son. And I would hear things like, I've heard things from family members and other people in the church. Oh, if that happened to one of my kids, I would so and so and so and so. But then if they hear it happen to you, it's kind of like, oh, you know, that's life, man. You know?
Yeah, there's a real disconnect there.
So there is more going on, of course, than we know than the pedophilia. We know that. And there is elders involved, and there is other members in the church involved. And that's why you have to be careful reporting to some of them, because they want you to report it to them. Okay. So that happens then. They're very, very intelligent, like Todd said. It's always the problem, as Mike, you're a proud man, brave man, Mike. Okay. And like you said, it's people who know you and who you like and you hang out with and who you look up to and respect, who will do these things to you. Okay. So then what happens is when it comes out, it totally divides your family, doesn't it? Of course it does, because they like that person too, as much as you did, right? So now we're, you know, so as a survivor, you're very, very scared who you talk to and the things you say. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents, but we all have to wake up here. This is way out of hand. Okay. We knew it happened in the world, didn't we? And in the Catholic Church. But nobody really thought it happened in this church, did they? But it always happens in your backyard. Anyways, thank you guys.
Thank you so much. And I hope you can see there's a little outpouring of love here for you on screen and in the chat. And that's why I've been begging the workers, if they just listen to the survivors. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. And no more. And the FBI wouldn't have opened this investigation if it was just a few cases. This is a systemic problem, and it needs to be reported and dealt with.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Hey, Angela, it's like the FBI believes survivors. They would not have done this if they did not believe survivors. They believe you, and it is your human right to not be abused. It's your human right. Yep. No child should be raised in a community where abuse is upheld and crimes are committed and people say, look the other way in the name of God. No child should ever experience that.
No, we can't have people committing suicide. We can't have this. Yeah. You know, so really, you know, that's why as a survivor, we get so upset and irritated when we sit back and you hear people say things like that, because you're like, come on, How can you think this is okay? It's not okay. There was a gentleman several months ago. He put on social media, I know him, but I won't mention his name. It's no big deal. But he said, you know, if this was your doctor, if this was somebody working in your grocery store, if this was a principal in your school, if this was some dude in your town, guess what? Just like I see in my town all the time, they get in trouble, man. They get in trouble. So why is it okay in this church to sit back on the sidelines?
It's not.
Not okay.
It's not okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
thanks.
sharing.
Thanks
Love
so
you,
much.
Ange.
Thanks for sharing.
I mean,
The
I don't
next question.
know if there are any
Go
more
ahead.
questions after that, but I mean, to me, that's it. I mean, that's palpable pain. And what more do you need to know? So go ahead, next question. If we want more, but that's, to me, that's a wrap. Go ahead.
Okay. Another question is the FBI going to comb through websites that have so much information to gather evidence, or would that be considered third hand and need direct contact with victims?
Well, they've been paying attention, obviously. And I think that's where they've gotten some of their information. Go ahead, Todd.
I was just going to say they'll look at that and they may contact people directly, but they ultimately need to talk directly to a witness or victim. So.
And I just want to say this too, again, we asked, Cynthia's probably gonna be mad about this, but we asked the FBI to slow this process down so that survivors could metabolize this. We really want you guys to have the right care. We want you to let people that you know have the right care. Like, take your time. There is no rush. This has been decades and decades and decades in the making. And there are a lot of people who can start coming forward, but give the survivors the time and space to metabolize this process and watch what you say online. Like, again, I cannot stress that enough. Like, lives are on the line here, and we all have a duty and responsibility to one another to help guide each other to safety. And again, that's a big word that I don't think is really achievable, especially considering in this community that we all grew up in. But let's honor that in one another and help survivors, give them the space and time and being tender with them so that, yes, the FBI is taking their time, but they believe survivors, whether you're in the States, in Canada, anywhere in the world, this is for every single survivor. This hotline is for every single survivor.
Also, since Lauren just mentioned commenting online, if you're going to comment online, ask yourself before you comment, what is this doing to help survivors? Stop and think before you post. What is this doing to help a survivor? Please.
Yes, I can't emphasize that enough.
Mm-hmm.
Words hurt.
Words hurt.
And when it's written on a public forum like that, and then it generates unhealthy, toxic conversation, it's not helpful.
Can I chime in here?
Go ahead, Isabel.
Hello. Okay, so full confession here. I've been on this call this whole time. When I joined, I saw somebody on the call who sent me a very inappropriate direct message on another forum. You know who you are. I won't call you out by name. But so what I decided to do was to change my name So I put up a fake name, and I'm sitting here this whole call, listening to all you brave folks, to other survivors. And I want to take this opportunity to tell that person that you have no right to attack survivors like you did. What you posted on that other forum was so inappropriate. And I felt bad for the other people. I didn't see it right away. And I realized when I found it later that the comments you made most likely were directed at me. So I asked you, I invited you to ask me any questions that you had, because I had nothing to hide. And instead you sent me a direct message with no questions and just a bunch of veiled personal attacks. So I'm sitting here on this call today, and well, you can probably tell I've been afraid, because I know you know my perpetrator. You admitted to being his friend. And I've been sitting here afraid, and what you're doing is not right. So I want to thank all of you for the support and the advocacy. I think Cynthia mentioned in her podcast interview with Jonathan McLernan, excuse me, that you know, people have thanked her because all their life they've been waiting for an opportunity just to be heard. So I do want to thank you personally. I thanked you in the text messages or emails that I've sent you, but I thank you personally, because just this ability to be heard after, you know, decades, keeping this mostly to myself, but then little by little telling people that I knew. But now just being able to share and know that there are so many others who've been in the same situation, who are in the same situation. I mean, what you've created here is phenomenal. It's just unprecedented, and it is so needed. So please excuse for emotional, but
no, it's palpable. It's so this is we grew up in has turned into a culture of trauma. We can see it right here in this call tonight. It's a culture of trauma. Let's turn that around. Let's turn that around. And one way you start, you know, Isabel came into some chat later online. We want advocates out there shutting that crap down. See it, recognize it, and shut it down, and have each other's back, and change this culture of trauma into a culture of care. That's what I
yeah. I was so thankful because like I said, I didn't see, actually the person took down the original post. It was about survivor credibility. And apparently it was really
not okay.
negative.
Not okay. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah,
not okay for any survivor to see.
Negative.
That's not okay for any survivor to see.
Yeah, and so there were other survivors who actually took that on. And so I stumbled across this, and I was like, what is all of this about? And it was late at night. I was just like, I can't, I just can't right now. So next day I logged in and there was some back and forth on that, some more back and forth, but the person who was posting this actually deleted all of the posts and but thankfully, a lot of that was shut down. But it just like it just bothered me so much that, this caused such a kerfluffle. I mean, that's such a that's I mean it was more like an uproar. And it just bothered me because, really it should have just been like that should have been a DM to me. Don't be if you feel like you need to attack somebody, cut to the chase, bring it to like, I mean, I'm just talking about myself. Like I would have rather that you came directly to me and said what you had to say rather than, hurt so many other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened. That's not okay. And I'm sorry that happened to you.
But that's like what we need to do is like, so I'm sitting here in fear, feeling kind of ashamed in a way. Not ashamed, but just really like I have to hide in the closet again. And then listening to all you guys, Mike Havoc, and I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names, but the other folks who spoke up, I'm like, I can't sit here and hide anymore. So, and the shame really just needs to be on folks who just, quite frankly, don't, I mean, way to kick people who've already been, kicked around. Like, how does that make you feel good about yourself? I really wonder. So I better get off my soapbox now because, yeah, I don't need to say anymore. So thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. Thank you.
May I speak to that?
Go for it, Mike.
Isabel, thank you for your courage. Well, first of all, I wrote that. Tears are beautiful. I can't say enough about your light, your honest truth. I'm so motivated and encouraged by your courage to come on here and speak to us. I'm not sure I could have been that brave, so I'm really grateful that you were attacked. It wasn't a kerfluffle, it was an attack. Somebody attacked you and put you into freeze and flight. I'm just sitting there picturing, how would I have felt? I would have felt cold. My body would have went into freeze flight, because that's what happens to me when somebody attacks me. I don't know, some people go into fight, but I get really cold, so I go into freezing, and I go into people pleasing, and I go into, I don't know, I just get really cold, and I just hide. So I can really relate to what you said. And so it was a coward who attacked you and then hid and then deleted. And that was just an awful thing that happened to you. So it wasn't a kerfluffle. It was an absolute attack on somebody who was a survivor, who went from a victim to a survivor, and you were a member of this tribe, and we got your back. Does that make sense? I don't know if hopefully I'm making some kind of sense, but I really appreciate the words that you spoke. I hope you can hear me. I know I'm not great with technology. I'm 55, so you can imagine. But I hope that it made some sense to you. Okay.
I hear you.
Good.
And yes. very familiar
Oh.
with fight, flight, freeze, and yeah,
Oh, good.
my default freeze too. But
What is yours? Go
there's
ahead.
another. Oh, uh, I said my default is freeze too.
Oh,
I mean,
there we
it's
go.
also
See?
freeze
I totally relate
or
to you.
flight.
You totally have my heart.
Yeah, and likewise, you have mine. And yeah, there's actually a fourth one.
Oh, good.
It's
Go
called
ahead.
fawn.
Ah, I've heard
It's
that
called
one. Can you explain?
fawning. I mean, so I'm not a psychologist. Understanding of it is that you so there's this reaction that many have that, you know, when in the face of trauma, like that they will, and I think this applies to this community a lot just because of the way we've been raised. But they a person who's facing trauma or feeling under threat, they will they'll start fawning, and that which means they'll start like kind of going along and
Go along to get along.
they may they're you know, like they're agreeing to what's going on, like to the trauma
Right.
that's happening to them. And
Almost like people
it's a very,
pleasing.
yeah, people pleasing. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a
No,
very,
I'm actually, you're helping me a lot here because I was actually just working on this one. So I'm really grateful for this. Thank you.
yeah, and
Go ahead.
but it's often misconstrued as like, well, that person wasn't really hurt because, you know, they seem to be just going along with, you know, what happened and or what was happening, and but we were groomed to do that. Like, I mean, we've been raised not to make waves, and you know, to really hold certain people up on in you know, up on a pedestal, and you know, who are we to say that like a worker who's behaving in ways that feels hurtful, you know, who are we to call them out, especially when we're kids, right? So
Yep. Oh man, I just
sorry,
love
I'm
it.
kind
You
of
are like you.
Oh, I just wanted to say, Dr. Bolin, I know you and I had discussed this earlier, is that
She's
if people,
following the lioness. This is beautiful. Thank you so much.
if any of you would like to take, you know, a conversation into a side room as this conversation,
Yeah, I'm sorry. We totally.
no, it's not, no, it's not an apology. I want to honor both, you know, I want to honor what is going on. And I also want to honor that there is a lot for every single survivor to process. And so if Dr. Bolin, if you would like to do like a breakout room, you know, if Isabel, if you'd like to talk, that we want to offer that and provide that, if that's something that is needed, anyone else as well. And not just out of, you know, concern for, I know it is, you know, I live in New York, it's almost 1 a.m., but we have a few more questions to get to. But I also want to honor Isabel, you know, your experience. So offering both things, and that it's a lot, you know, people are going through so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, I didn't mean.
yeah. I was pretty excited.
No
but
apologies.
It's
Don't
about helping you.
apologize.
No
No,
apologies.
Okay.
your
fair
words
enough.
are very powerful. All of your
Yeah.
words are. And we did set it up where we can break out in a breakout session if we need to. You can private message me and no one will see you because there's 300 people on this call. So
Oh my God.
I can
I
put
had
people
no idea.
in a
Sorry
breakout
about
if
that.
needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kristen, did you have a question?
Kristen? Kristen, you're on mute.
Sorry. I just wanted to thank you all for the hard work that you've done. And thank you everyone for sharing. I have a question, and Cynthia, I know you know this is a very big concern of mine. I'm very concerned about what a lot of us share online, because when we press charges, then the criminal lawyers can get onto all these sites and see what we have shared and use that against us in the court case. Do any of you have anything to add to that, or maybe to make others aware of what they share online before it goes to court?
Great question, Kristen. Great question. So for our civil cases, we pretty much have our clients delete their social media, but I have cases currently that we're working on subpoenas to Twitter and Facebook and all of them, because you can still get that information, right? So anything you've posted online about your case can actually be detrimental to your case. About your abuse. If you've talked about your abuse online, that can actually be used against you in your case. Now, this one I haven't worried so much about, because when this all first started, I didn't think there was any path forward for a civil claim. It's going to happen. We're going to get to a place where we can file civil claims. Okay, that's going to happen. So we do need to be careful. And then what people are filing criminal charges, and those are in play right now. And anything you've posted on social media is fair game for defense lawyers. So we do always advise victims to delete their social media and not post about their abuse or their case online. Todd, do you have anything to add to that? You're muted.
Any statement that conflicts, so if a victim gives their account of what happened to them in grand jury testimony, and then later testifies in a trial, and then defense will always use prior statement, any statement that conflicts with their testimony in court. So defense always loves to bring up inconsistency in testimony. So it's just something to be cautious of. It shouldn't stop anybody from reporting. It's way down the road. It's unlikely that it would impact somebody, but just be aware.
Yep.
So for myself, there's been multiple people that have asked me to share my story, or to even go on and talk a little bit about even how the workers are dealing with me currently. And I've just been concerned about doing that publicly, for that to work against me in the current charges that are taking place. So
I would not. I would advise you not to post online, because you have a current case.
Yeah. And I was sure that was the case, but I just didn't know if the others on here knew that they needed to be very careful.
Mike's rubbing his head. We've talked about this, but the story is consistent. I mean, if the story is changing in consistency, that can be a huge problem. But the story is consistent throughout. But yeah, they can use it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'd like
you.
to. Oh, go ahead.
Julie, did you have a comment?
Hi, yes. I just wanted to go back to the culture thing. And I also want to say thank you so much to everyone who has been on the forefront of this. You're such a godsend, Cynthia and Lauren, and everyone else behind the scenes. But my comment was just going to be about the culture and the backlash for standing up for victims. It's been shocking for a Christian community to have so much backlash towards people who are trying to stand up for victims. And I'm just a little person, and I've been threatened to be sued, and I've been asked, are you the reason why such and such can't go to meeting anymore? It's like, no, I'm not the one. His actions were the reason why he can't go to meeting anymore. But I just think it's really important to start educating people on spiritual abuse. I was not aware of it until I looked into it a little bit, and I was like, oh, we're all victims of spiritual abuse. And one of the things that happens is just a campaign that goes, like, the church somehow just figures out how to campaign against whoever they pick. And it's very powerful and it's very real. And anyway, I just wanted to bring that up and just to point out that we need to be aware of spiritual abuse, because it is behind the scenes pushing everything. Anyway, yeah, thanks for all your work.
You too, Julia.
Thank you, Julia, for everything.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a question or a statement question from the chat, and let me just make sure. Linda, are you on here by chance? Linda Block? Yes. Do you oh, let me help you unmute 1 second. There we are.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Hi, Linda.
It's nice to lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. I would love if you're comfortable. If you're not, no worries. If you could ask that question to Donna and Dr. Bullen, I think they might have some insights for you. My perspective might be different than Cynthia's or Todd's, but yeah, I think Dr. Bullen and Donna could answer one of your questions really well if that works for you.
The one about nightmares and that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, since all of this has hit us, then I thought I'd been done with therapy, and I am right back at 75 in the middle of dealing with the stuff that was so bad that I couldn't deal with it years ago. And so I am having a rough time. I'm presently in a really rough time. Having nightmares, PTSD big time, panic every evening starts up. And so it seems like nighttime is worse, which is there are a lot of survivors. And it's like, I know if I can put words to what's going on, it helps. It takes the power of what's happened and kind of takes it down a notch or two. So when it was said about ask yourself, is this going to help other survivors? Then I'm thinking about things that I have posted and gotten support on like on Wings, if maybe I shouldn't be doing that. So that's my question. Because I don't want to call somebody in the middle of the night. I know Lauren's willing, but I don't want to do that.
I love you, Linda, so much. You and Sweetie Pie.
Yeah, Sweetie Pie.
Yeah. Linda, it's a really great question. One thing that I can maybe speak to is that the internet is an uncontrolled environment. And so you may find support in one time that you post, but then it may not be supportive. It's just the environment is uncontrolled. Like therapy is a controlled environment. It's a safe place that you can enter into and process and receive coping skills. The one thing about posting on the internet, it's very unlikely that you're going to get coping skills back to help you work through what you're trying to work through. And so there's a big difference between going into therapy to receive some skills back to be able to work through the trauma and process it in a controlled environment versus when you post on the internet And you're right. It is very therapeutic to talk through. That's why talking therapy works, right? It is very helpful to our brain. But when it's done in an uncontrolled environment, we don't know who's seeing it. We don't know who may be triggered by maybe some things that you're talking about. Another survivor, that might be a triggering point for them. And you didn't intend it to be triggering. You were just, sharing your experience. So that's why we don't recommend doing that on the internet, because it's not safe for you. We talk a lot about psychological safety. And so we can't guarantee psychological safety on the internet. And so that's why we try to keep boundaries around that. Again, we want you to feel supported and have that communal care. But when it comes to trauma symptoms and getting the things in place that are helpful, it's better to do that in a controlled environment. And I'll kind of open it up for Donna if she wants to add anything.
You did a great job. Thank you very much, Natalie. And Linda, sometimes the darkest hours, such as when we're sleeping and when things are really quiet, is when those trauma triggers can really become dominant. Because sometimes that's when the brain doesn't realize that what you experienced was then, and this is now. So it's sort of a spillover from what happened before, kind of intrudes into today. And sometimes that's why you have those nightmares and flashbacks and triggers. But thank you, Natalie. That was really wonderful. Talking about the controlled environment, which is what counseling is.
Yeah, and I just want to offer to Linda that, as a survivor, I think those midnight, my sister and I call it our witching hour, and we usually text each other. And I say, like, are you up? And she's like, yeah, I'm up. She's like, are you up? I'm like, yeah, I'm up. We have those moments. And so finding those safe people that you can interact with, or an advocate. I also have 2 dogs. I know you have Sweetie Pie. That those dogs sometimes hear a lot of my stuff, in the middle of the night. And so I just want to offer that, I know Dr. Bolin, I know Donna and others, we can help think about ideas that might be beneficial for fellow survivors and what those resources might look for. Because I think it's such a good question. I'm really glad you asked it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And again, I love you.
Thank you. I love you too. So does Sweetie Pie.
Hey, Eva, I'm going to call on Eva. I don't know who's had their hand up the longest, but
Thank you. And I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. I apologize if I might be, I had to miss most of this meeting while I was teaching because I couldn't be here. So I hope I'm not repeating.
You're good.
I have 2 questions. One, if somebody is a survivor, but they're not talking about that, they're talking about scripture, Jesus, caring about others, and so on social media, then would that hurt that victim later if they would be prosecuting?
No, I don't think so. Are you asking about if you're just commenting about religion and spirituality and that type of thing?
Yeah, just kind of be a support to
You're
others.
good. Yeah, no, you're good. As long as you're not talking about the specifics of your case, you're fine.
And I'm not necessarily referring to myself, but I wanted to raise that.
Yeah,
question.
no, it's good. That's
Thank
a good
you.
question.
And
yeah.
Thank you. And the other thing is, now that the FBI is requesting information from whoever knows, does that mean that if a survivor has confided to someone, that then that someone will feel obligated to call up the FBI and tell it?
They shouldn't. The FBI needs the survivor to call.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Brittany, you get something?
So I'm Lauren's sister, Brittany. Hello, all. I just wanted to take a moment. So obviously, Lauren is very highly involved, and I tend to be a little bit quieter in the background in more private conversation. Like Lauren and I discussed last night, like it's been 17 years since we left the cults, and we survived 17 years of the cults. And so like it's a very monumental time, and I recognize that the people that are present this evening are in all different stages of acceptance, acknowledgement, processing, activation, somatic feelings, different levels of trauma and exposure. And I will be reaching out. There's an email started with Dr. Boleyn from Lauren, but just calling to attention that, we do need structures surrounding spaces for people to be heard with clinical support, but also maybe more like community spaces that aren't just trauma dumping. One of the reasons that I've stayed quieter in the process of all of this since discovering information 5 years ago that led to a lot of the connections of the people here was actually because I was doing individualized work and, spent over a decade in isolation away from the community once leaving it. And I see that there's a profound need for a communal space. My biggest concern though in that is there's a reason that there's anonymous settings for people that struggle with overcoming challenges. As well, there's ways to safely navigate that with professional help, and I think that there's like a significant need for that. And with this exposure, for some of us, it's not new. I've spent many years to be able to survive this presence of the exposure. And even in that, like there's going to be a huge need, and I hope that this kind of calls to attention and opportunity for those that would be interested in starting to fill that need to create more communal spaces. Like a town hall is great, but like, can we facilitate 500 people needing to be heard in 3 hours? It's not realistic. And let's be honest, like you look at the statistics of how many people are on online forums on Facebook, we're talking about 5 times that amount with needs to be heard, and cultivating space to allow people to have a voice, when for decades, and honestly in our family, 100 years of people going unheard. I think like maybe this is an opportunity for like a call to action, that we as a collective maybe can create a community out of rubble. And thank you to all of you guys for doing the work that you are doing. As well, just to share with those who are interested in talking to the FBI outside of the forum, if you're contacted, I also did an interview. It was a 3-hour interview. I did that in November, and speaking from personal experience of working with the FBI, I just want to encourage you all to remember that you have a story, and it's significant, and it's powerful, and it's empowering. Like I spent 17 years of my life begging for help from every level of our society that we lived in and the authorities, and no one ever helped me. And I waited until I was 29 to get professional help when I was at the point of ending my life. And it's very challenging, and I don't think I would have survived that experience if I hadn't had some support systems in place. And one of the reasons I've stayed quiet is I had a conversation with my trauma-informed therapist that there's a space between victim to survivor and a space between survivor to advocate. And in that fill is therapeutic need, right? And I'm still between survivor becoming an advocate because I'm still doing work, and I will continue to do work for the rest of my life. But I just like strongly encourage all of you, like, you know, courage truly like is facing fear and walking through it. And there's a lot of us that will be there to stand with you and lean into AFT, ask for the resources. And there's so many levels of care. And we have a beautiful community that can be built from this. So thank you all.
Thank you, Brittany.
That was amazing, Brittany. I think you're really close to that entering the advocate space. That was great. And I think you're right. I think we need to create a space where we can handle all. Go ahead and speak about it, Dr. Bolin.
No, and Brittany will connect. Would love to connect on this. Yeah, it's a great suggestion, and it's very needed. And we've had actually quite a few survivors that are entering into the area of advocacy that has brought this up too, of the need. So I think there's a community out there. I agree with you completely.
Mm-hmm.
You're ready for another question. Is domestic violence synonymous with sexual violence, sexual assault, and should that be reported?
Well, they can go hand in hand. And it's a crime. Domestic violence is a crime. It should be reported.
I don't have my phone, Alyssa, so if you want to ask the questions, I'm good.
Okay. Do you offer therapy services for parents of children who are abused, but the children are deceased?
Yes. Because we have parents who have lost children because of abuse. So, yes.
And then someone wanted to add on to that question. What about for parents of victim survivors who are living and are now adults?
Do we have anybody currently? Yeah, I think we do. I think we are offering that. Yeah.
We do. And also, you know, I think of the Indigenous 7th generation rule applies in healing. 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. Like that's the ripple we're hoping for. And that means like every person on this call is in need of care. Like that's the actuality of it. And this community trauma is what they think is their culture. Crimes are their culture. Child sexual assault is their culture. And that's not culture.
No.
So, you know, yeah, all of these things, you reach out, you name it, we'll figure it out. Like, trust me, we might be building, we might be duct taping pieces to the flying airplane as we go, because it's true, we do. And I promise you, we will figure it out. We have patch and therapy and inpatient, outpatient all over the world. So like, Yeah, we got you.
How many overseers have been interviewed by the FBI?
Well, we know of one.
Depends
but
Depends
there'll
on
be more.
how you ask Daryl Dolan how his interview went. He'll tell you it was great and they loved him. He is amazing. But so far, he's one of the ones who's been most open about it, I think you could say.
Yeah, there'll be more. I mean, there's an open federal investigation at this point. They set up a hotline, so won't be the last one.
Yeah, and by the way, like a bunch of us on our communications team, we invited all the overseers and workers. They have no excuse. They know what's going on. And their head in the sand approach does not work. They know the FBI is involved. So make no mistake, they are aware of what's going on and they know what's happening, and they are making the choice to not show up for their community. That's what this leadership is, quote unquote.
And when you contact overseers about perpetrators, could an update be made to a list that's published? There are overseers who are not informing the community and fellowship widely enough that these perpetrators have been reported to them.
Well, we understand that, and we're fighting really hard. And I'm going to let Todd speak about this. It's exhausting. I mean, we're going to quit trying to work with the overseers, frankly, because it hasn't worked. We've tried to be really nice about it. We've tried to notify them of perpetrators. We've tried to get them removed from meetings. When we've been successful, then we find out they're back in meetings. Almost every single perpetrator that we try to get removed from meetings, it's a fight with the overseer. And you're right, they don't notify the people that they need to notify. So we'll just we'll work through it. People will have the names they need to have. Fair enough, Todd?
Yeah,
Would you add
absolutely.
anything?
I would just say that a lot of the overseers, when they have been notified, have been at best defensive, and in other cases rude and ungodly. And so it's really it's amazing, some of the responses.
Pretty disheartening.
Yeah, and Cynthia has the patience of a patron saint. She truly does. And I text these guys our updates every time we put an update out. All of these men receive our updates. They are willfully choosing to be complicit, to enable criminals. Some of them are criminals. And so that is the leadership. That is who, so there's no negotiating with that if no one is held accountable, if they're not willing to even speak to survivors, and they want survivors to go to therapy with workers. It's not I just don't, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Just go spill your guts to the FBI, you're gonna get more out of it than talking to your overseer about perps.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah.
They just don't care. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it. They don't care about survivors. They care deeply, evidently, about perps, but they don't care about survivors.
And Cynthia and Todd and I could tell you story after story after story of overseers and workers that have lied to survivors about taking perps out of meeting, about handling situations, lying about law enforcement. Like this is not one Greek tragedy. This is thousands of Greek tragedies all around you. And so just knowing that these overseers hold these stories in their hands and they are responsible. They are. Whether or not law enforcement does anything with that, we'll see, but they are responsible for what they've done.
Will the FBI give us indications of how many hotline calls they get or how many
No.
The FBI is a one-way street with information. They take information in, they don't give information back.
Okay. Um,
Can I make a comment really quick, Alyssa?
go for it.
The statement that Cynthia made that overseers don't care. I just want everybody else to know that's not just her opinion. My sister that's in the work advised me to get as much factual information as I could before making an assumption like that. And I did that over these months. And me and a bunch of others can attest. We're witnesses directly to that. They do not care. The evidence is there. It's not just Cynthia's opinion.
I mean, they may say they care, but actions speak louder than words. So
Okay. Do we say anything if a prior convicted pedophile was allowed without our knowledge in our homes, and the only reason they weren't on the sex offender registry was because it was historical before required reporting? No crimes were committed to our knowledge, but the allowance of them being around children is atrocious.
should you report that? I mean, that's terrible. I mean, they're convicted child sex offender. That's what they were, and they weren't on the registry because it was before it was required.
Yeah.
Yeah, they shouldn't be around children.
Okay, so they should report that those perps were like sent to their home, basically.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see.
The
As for
perp knows that too, by the way. The perps know this. I mean, they know they're convicted sex offenders, and that they really should not be around children. So
as for going to law enforcement and the FBI, they can't always take a report on people who have only been grooming. That has been my case. I think that is why it's so important to talk to Cynthia. What are your thoughts, Cynthia?
just report to the FBI. Don't filter. Just report.
Okay. This person said, wondering if the Montana overseer has been reported for the pornography sites he has been following on Facebook.
Reported to.
Maybe the question is, should that be reported to the FBI?
Well, I think they should look at its devices, but that's sure, report him.
Have worker lists been given to the FBI or customs to flag for international travel? Computer review is mentioned. Also possible undeclared cash in their possession.
We've been reporting kind of everything like that comes in to the FBI.
When will the list of perpetrators be shared?
As soon as we're not drinking from a fire hose.
I think I've gone through all of the questions. Wait, we just had another one come through. How should we expect this FBI investigation to proceed?
No clue. Survivors will, I mean, we don't know what will come of it. Survivors will report there. I think there's a survivor submission form. It's been such a crazy day. Is there a text number even that they can text? I think so. I think people have been texting.
Yeah, there's
Hotline, email, texting. So tons of survivors reported today. I know that for a fact because they let me know. The FBI will start interviewing those people, and this is going to take a really long time because they're going to interview every single one of those people, and then they're going to interview witnesses to those allegations, and it's going to take a very long time. Hopefully within a couple, 3 years, charges will be placed against some perps.
Okay. What would be a good way to reach out, say by text, to people whose background you don't know in a trauma-informed way to make them aware of the FBI investigation?
I mean, I would just send them the link to the notification, I think, and just say, hey, I just wanted to let you know what's going on. Thought you might find this of interest.
If you
Yeah,
know
go
the
ahead.
if you know the person well, maybe even a phone call of that personal human to human connection around, I want you to know about this. Is it okay if I text you? Sometimes it's better to ask, because sometimes when you have a text in front of you, you can't get away from it. And so sometimes it's better to just reach out with a phone call first and just check in with them and then ask to text. We definitely want to share the information and make sure everyone has access to it. But definitely to be trauma informed, sometimes a phone call is better.
Yeah, that's all the questions we have here.
Amazing.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for hanging in here with us. I know it's late.
Yeah, and to
Really late.
anyone who needs resources, please reach out. Dr. Bullen, myself, Cynthia. I know, there are others on this call, and anything else you have questions, but please write yourself a sticky note. And Todd, can you just reiterate the message for everyone just one last time?
Yes, please.
Don't self-filter, just report.
And be gentle with each other online, please, 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 please.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have
Thanks,
a wonderful
everyone.
evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Night, night.
Guys. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Cynthia, Dr. Bolin, Rona, do you guys want to hop over to WhatsApp?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Night,
Bye.
Eva.
Good for everybody.
Night,
Okay.
everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
You're the only one I can see on camera, but night to everyone else too.
Good night. Thank you.